All right, so the other day I did like a review on the review of the Andrew Tate Pierce Morgan conversation. I'm a little bit curious, so I'm gonna take a listen. We're gonna see what these fine fellers have to say. Gonna see what these fine fellers have to say. Let's get this going.
You're one of the most infamous men in the world, Andrew Tate's misogynistic tirade.
An awkward thing happening right now.
Tate's have been viewed billions of times online. He's now been effectively banned, though, from the internet. He doesn't think that's fair. Tonight, I'm going to try and work out if it is.
From London, this is Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Well, good evening from London, and welcome to a special edition of Piers Morgan
Devil
Uncensored.
Dog
That
super
pot's
chatted
hard.
$5.
I'm gonna mute these
when
after
you
this
doing
alert.
another sub talk, I would love to talk to you about a couple things about your channel, but love your content. Thanks
Well,
for the
thanks.
bits.
Thanks, brother. Whenever I feel like it, eventually, when I'm on when I'm feeling like it, I'll do it like a chat with you guys.
Andrew Tate, one-on-one.
Andrew Tate.
He's the most famous man you probably never heard of, with billions of views online. At one point this year, more people were searching Google for Andrew Tate than Donald Trump or Kim Kardashian. A former professional kickboxer, he was kicked off Big Brother in 2016 after a video emerged of him striking a woman, in what they now both claim was a consensual sex game.
Well, they actually both claimed that like very quickly after that point. But
Since made millions as a pornographer and casino owner in Romania.
That's
But it's his
true.
online videos that have made him notorious across the world, posing as a playboy with fast cars, cigars, weapons and cash.
weapons and cash. I think I might want to like play a game while I watch this. I'm just gonna turn me down because they struggle with the audio, so we'll keep on.
And his often scandalous views on women.
Or instruct a female to provide sustenance.
Ooh.
Cook.
So I think my sister is her husband's property, yes.
Tells young men they can get as rich as him by paying for his digital life lessons.
True.
I have 100 business tips I'm going to teach you, which will allow you to make your own money instantly.
But amid a
I
global
heard
media
myself down,
backlash, the net has closed on Andrew Tate. While millions still share his videos, he's effectively banned from the web, booted off Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. To his fans, he's a misunderstood satirist and the victim of big tech censorship. To many others, he's a malicious misogynist. Tonight, I'll try and get to the truth.
Okay.
Well, some of the opinions Andrew Tate shares in his videos are undeniably deeply offensive. We're going to show you some of them on the show. I think you should see them for yourself, not simply hear what he says about them or what other people say about them. Tens of millions of people across the world follow Andrew Tate, and with a big following comes a big responsibility, as well as a public interest in holding his views to account. If outrageous opinions are read aloud, they can be challenged and exposed for what they are. If they're silenced, the person holding these views can become a martyr. So that's why I invited Andrew Tate to come here tonight, and he joins me now live. So, Andrew, well,
Okay. Yeah, I'll say, yeah, I mean, sure, he can definitely become a martyr. I honestly feel like in this situation, he's just kind of faded out of existence and people just kind of don't care about him anymore. That's just like my opinion. You know, I do think that his views are toxic when it comes to women in general. I think that the biggest problem that people are facing when it comes to engaging with Andrew Tate is that they think he's a bad guy. I don't think he's a bad guy. I know he has a lot of allegations against him, but nothing is proven. And like, you know, listen, I'm not going to operate as if like the allegations against him are true, especially when they've been investigated and it seems that there's no true weight to them. It's possible that there could be an infrastructure problem, but like, you know, we are supposed to innocent until proven guilty. Am I right? That being said, I think the problem is that people think that he's like a bad person or that he's a dishonest with his perspective or that he hates women. I don't think he hates women at all. I think he has regressive views on women that are not good, for sure. I think that's true, but I don't think he hates them. But I think that's the problem when, you know, people are engaging with the rhetoric. They're like, he hates women. He doesn't like. I don't think he hates women at all. I think he has a regressive view. I think he's disrespectful to women. I think that he upholds double standards that are anti-woman. For instance, the idea that like higher body counts for women make them bad. And a lot of you are like, well, I think that's true. And you can look at statistics that show that like women with higher body counts in like long-term relationship tend to report being less happy after like a long period of time. And you could be like, see, I told you. The problem is that men have the same issue. Men with higher body counts report like more happiness the fewer partners they have in their relationship compared to women. And so like if you said, I think people with high body counts are bad, that's fine. But like the fact that you apply it to women, but then advocate for men to be able to go around and have like, you know, be as promiscuous as possible. Well, like that's wrong. You see how like the double standard isn't even upheld by like statistics. And that is like the problem with Andrew Tate. And there's a lot of perspectives about like these double standards about men and women that aren't supported by any like actual data or even his life experience. Because realistically speaking, no offense, but like who is Andrew Tate to talk about successful long-term relationships as a man who was not in one at all and who struggles to find a partner in his mid-30s? Despite the fact that he's very rich, he seems to have a trouble finding women. And that statistic we talked about where like men struggle and people in general struggle when they've had like a lot of bodies, it seems to be like materializing itself in Andrew Tate. So not only does the statistics go against what he's saying, but his own life experience goes against what he's saying when it comes to like body counts or high body counts for men, as well as justifying like men cheating, right? Because like his take isn't like, hey, listen, if his take was like, hey, listen, men are more physical cheaters and women usually are like a little more emotional, or men are more physical when it comes to sex, women are more emotional. So like men can have, you know, less attached sex, and like men maybe struggle more with their infidelity. I'd be like, okay, I could see that. Because I heard him one time say like, I don't think a man should have like his entire like long-term relationship ruined because he cheats once. I can agree with that, as long as like, you know, that's between him, that person, and the partner. But like he's not saying that in a nuanced way to have like a real honest conversation. He's more, it's really a lot of what he's signaling is that it's okay for a man to like cheat or to have sex with other women in a relationship, where it's not okay for a woman to do that. And then I just generally think it's not okay for anybody to do that, you know? Okay.
Welcome, first of all. You come all the way from Romania to do this interview.
Correct.
What do you hope to achieve from this interview? Why are you here?
It'd be interesting to have a conversation with you. You've certainly been the subject of your own divided opinions in the world. There's a lot of people who would say some of the things you say are perhaps dangerous or toxic. So I thought you'd be a good person to speak to about this subject.
I don't know too much about Piers Morgan, but like, yeah, he seems to be a little controversial in some capacities.
Much about you before this year, and then I suddenly became very aware of you, as the world did, because as I said earlier, you were the #1 subject searched on Google ahead of Donald Trump. I didn't think it was even possible. Why did you get suddenly so popular stroke infamous, do you think?
I exploded. I certainly didn't do that with magic. I've been on the internet for a very long time. I think in the world we live in now, as the other side, the people who disagree with me, as they get more and more tyrannical in their censorships and their hate mobs, etc., as standard masculine practices are deemed toxic, I didn't put a magic spell on everybody. I managed to accumulate a large amount of affinity with the male populace across the Western world because I'm simply saying things that many men believe, think, and feel.
The problem.
So, like, here's the problem, is that, like, that's not necessarily true. The first thing I'd like to say is that the reason, and I remember watching Fresh and Fit have a conversation with, like, Destiny, I think, and Fresh Prince, he made a really good point. And he's like, I think the reason that Andrew Tate ultimately got banned is because his message was being delivered to children on Twitch. That's when he had the attention put on him the most. And I tend to think that's true. Let's be massively generous to Andrew Tate, and let's say that he's having like really educated, nuanced conversations about like men and women, which I don't think is true because I've looked into him more specifically. But let's say it is true. It kind of doesn't matter because the overwhelming majority of what people are seeing about Andrew Tate are like the most sexist things and most antagonistic, provocative, sexist things that he puts out. And then it's like, well, who's putting that out there? It's the clip channels that he incentivizes with his the Hustlers University, where he has like the affiliate links. And I'm not going to call it like a scam or anything, because like there is something offered in like a Discord. It's not, I don't think it's anything particularly profound from what I've looked into. But the thing is that if it's your own people taking you out of context and making you look sexist, well, it seems like the message that they're getting, at least from the children, which seem to be a large part of your audience, is the sexist stuff. So it's not that there are a lot of disenfranchised men that are struggling. Most of the people picking up on your message are young guys that just want to hate women. And then they kind of just go down that path. And a lot of the things that you say, let's say again that they're meant to be nuanced, you say them in such a provocative, antagonistic way that they're so open to interpretation that even if you don't mean it, they're picked up and they're used to be hateful towards women. Like, that's just a reality of what actually is happening. And so, like, you know, yeah, there are a lot of disenfranchised men, for sure, but you're not leading them down a positive path. They're not going to be happy following you. That's the thing I would say more than anything else. You're just not going to be happy following Andrew Tate. You're most likely not going to get rich. He does take advantage of, you know, people. Like, he has a webcam porn business while advocating and saying that porn is bad for you, which I think that it is. I think that we should have a conversation about that, especially since a lot of young men and women get their education from porn, which sets you up for like really bad sexual standards and relationship dynamics. But then he's selling a webcam porn for him, and his whole justifier for that, because he's talked about it, and I've watched him a lot more than you probably do. Is like, yeah, well, he's just kind of hey, it's just taking advantage of, guy. Or you know what? This is fresh and fits the Dart justifier. I don't think he actually said that. Sorry. Oh, well, he's just taking advantage of those guys. There's winners and losers in the world, and it's like, okay, well, that's not advocating for men to be better. That's just advocating for some men to take advantage of most other men. So.
What I would say is, I want to play you just a clip off the top. This is from Joe Rogan, who's somebody I absolutely love.
Sure.
And I think it
Joe
explains to me what I presume my issue with you is going to be, right?
Correct.
And you
right,
have absolutely got the right to try and persuade me otherwise.
Sure.
But Joe Rogan said this about you.
My 12-year-old and my 14-year-old asked me about Andrew Tate. My 14-year-old asked me, I said he's a legit world champion kickboxer. I go, I like him a lot. Why do you like him? And I was asking him. They said he says a lot of funny stuff on Twitter and TikTok. He f***ed up with the misogynist. Yes. Because if he didn't do that, if he just did the pro-male stuff.
So I thought
that's fair. I like that. I can respect that take. I wish we got to see a little more of what Joe Rogan said, because it's nice to see like a real strong guy like talk out against like the misogyny and shit without canceling somebody, without being like fuck you, you know what I mean? When it's like, yeah, man, I respect him as a fighter, because like what the reality is that Andrew Tate is a very hardworking guy. Like even if you think like even though some of the celebrity stunts are a little crazy with the Big Brother, like you don't become a professional kickboxer without working your ass off. So it's good to respect, it's good to respect that and understand that. Because he is a hardworking guy in that capacity. There are ways he takes advantage of people, like with his webcam business for sure, but like it's something to keep in mind.
Well, that was interesting, because when I've gone over everything that's been at the center of the debate about Andrew Tate, I come down with Joe Rogan in the sense that there's a lot of stuff you say I agree with. I've got 3 sons in their 20s. It's not easy actually being a young male in the modern world. And I think a lot of the things that you say about that can resonate with them. Yeah. The problem comes...
I would like to hear what it is that so like this is like a genuine question. Like what is it that he's saying that you feel is like an important thing that he says about young men? Because I haven't seen a whole lot of I've seen... So the only thing that I've seen, I guess I'd say positive about young men is talking about like some depression, kind of, in some ways, but not really. He has a very pick yourself up by your bootstraps ideology, which I think actually can be like really good and positive. And he doesn't want people taking like medication and stuff. And he does advocate in some senses of like guys working hard, but then that working hard seems to manifest in like, abandoning relationships with women and whatnot. I wish people could direct me, because I haven't seen like a really solid source of like the positives that Andrew Tate has said, because whether he doesn't say them a lot or they just don't make the rounds because that's not what resonates with people. There's not a whole lot that I've seen, and maybe I haven't been able to find it. I've watched a lot of Andrew Tate, and I haven't found a whole lot of the positives that people constantly claim to talk about.
With the, I don't know, 10, 20% or whatever of your output, which on the face of it appears to be blatant misogyny. And when you couple that with your massive influence and huge reach, that is why the social media companies have decided to effectively cancel you. I don't believe in cancellation. I don't believe in censorship particularly. That's why I've invited you to come on the show.
I believe in canceling my Netflix subscription, bro. That shit's fucking rip-off now.
But I do think a lot of the things you've said are blatant misogyny. Do you accept that?
So you made a very interesting point there. You just said on the face of it appear to be blatantly misogynistic.
Yeah.
I understand that on the face of some of the long format content I've made, if you're going to take a few seconds out of hours, chop it up, put it all over social media, accompanied with my massive fame, then things can absolutely not be taken out of context.
For sure, but you need to also understand that that's your guys doing it. And I've watched some long form Andrew Tate stuff, and it's not much different from what he's saying. That's from what I've seen. Again, put me in a different direction, but that's what your guys are putting out there. That's the message they're getting from it. I think it's very easy to say, well, you just haven't seen all my content, when like I feel like that's just that's like a cop out. It's kind of a cop out.
I do not hate women in any regard. I have no negative relationship with women.
And I don't think he hates women, by the way. I just think he has a regressive view on the interactions between men and women. I don't think he hates the women at all.
No women have come forward saying I've hurt them. I have no criminal record for hurting women. There's no way I can be seen as the face or the devil in regards to how men treat women on the planet.
That I would say, like, I wouldn't say the devil, but like you are very traditional, like, regressive male that like treats women with respect without understanding how you're treating women with respect. right? Again, we talked about the double standards of men versus women. We talked about just a fundamental thought that a man should control a woman, that a man should have ownership over women. I talk about how like I own my wife and my wife owns me as well. And there's like a mutual respect. But when you walk around, I don't think people understand this, when you walk around with this ideology that men should be more domineering of women, I've seen Andrew Tate compare women to children and dogs. And when I see him say that, it's not even in like in a negative capacity. It's in a capacity where he's like, I think men should protect women like the way that you protect from themselves and from like the outside world, the way that you protect like a dog or children. And it's not even supposed to be disrespectful, but that's the problem, isn't it? Is that he genuinely feels that that's like a reasonable interpretation to treat like women like less than. And the protection part is good, but you can be a protector of women as a man and do what I think men should be doing without treating women like a dog, right? And that's like the problem. And these ideologies where like, you know, you put the male's perspective first in the way that things work, it can lead to like bad boundaries when it comes to interacting with women. And like, I hate to be super did my game just like lag? Okay. I don't want to go like super off the rails, but realistically speaking, if you're speaking in this way about women, where you're prioritizing the male perspective first, and like, you know, you're kind of domineering over women, that type of perspective, one, if you're like a father or an influential male figure, can lead to a bad relationship standard for your daughter or like the women that look up to you in some capacity as they're growing up. Because you're teaching them the wrong thing. You're teaching them to allow a man to push their boundaries because they're supposed to be the domineering perspective. And you're also teaching those young girls potentially that they can't come to you if something really bad happens to them. And two, you're setting up men for bad relationships between women. I would argue that most like sexual assault, at least in the West, isn't like intentional sexual assault. It's men overstepping boundaries after like boundaries have been affirmed by a woman, and then she kind of submits out of fear, because we teach men to be super persistent, and like we don't draw the line on what is persistence versus like pushing way too far. The concept of like no means no. And it's one of those things where it's not super active. Andrew Tate would never say you should force a woman to have sex with you. But again, when you set up these like really big standards for like prioritizing the male perspective over the female perspective, you know, these are the things that unfortunately would be the outcome of like the ideology that he's pressing.
Absolutely not. The opposite. I believe in protecting and providing. I've been misunderstood. There's been large contingents of people who have tried very hard to purport lies about me. And the truth of the matter is, I've been producing content for a very long time. Hours and hours of videos been cut down to 2 or 3 seconds of clip.
Yeah, that's your
Those clips have gone
that.
viral and people misunderstand me.
But I think you've used this phrase to be taken out of context, and I'm not sure that is correct in the sense that it still comes out of your mouth. And some of the things you've said, I just think are blatantly.
Well, let's do them. Let's hear them.
Let's go through some.
Sure.
Right. So you said this about Me Too / rape. This is probably 40% of the reason I moved to Romania. In Eastern Europe, none of this garbage flies. You go to the police and say he raped me back in 1988. They'll say, well, you should have done something about it back then.
Yeah, so the point I was making was obviously at the height of the Me Too scandal, and also if we look at Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, there's been a lot of high-profile cases where men have been accused of things they did not do without evidence, and their lives have been completely and utterly destroyed. Right. When I say these things, people sit and say that, oh, he hates women. I don't hate women. I think rape is disgusting. I would take a...
Yeah, so listen, I understand that there are people who say that the Me Too movement has gone too far. And I think that the Johnny Depp Amber Heard is like a reasonable perspective on that. Realistically, whether you like this or not, I think that they were both kind of toxic mutually in their relationship. But she was able to prevail and seem like the victim for a long time because of Me Too. Absolutely. But I would also argue that the overwhelming majority of the Me Too movement was a very positive thing, right? He's also talked about how like a lot of those women that interacted with Harvey Weinstein, for instance, like they're not really victims and that they actually were complicit in the engagement with Harvey Weinstein and whatnot. And like, again, this is like a problematic take, because if Harvey Weinstein was basically like women were exchanging sexual favors for jobs, right? And that's my understanding of it. Problem is when you make a standard of setting a sexual exchange for a job, it forces women who obviously, a lot of them who aren't going to want to have sex with you, to have sex with you in order to get the job. And so it puts like, yeah, a huge power dynamic. You can either have sex with this guy you find it disgusting, that could make your career, or you just don't have a career. And that's like a massive way of like, that's sexual exploitation. These types of perspectives, again, lead to a poor interpretation of consent between men and women. And so fundamentally, again, like Andrew Tate doesn't hate women, but these consistent perspectives of like the male versus female dynamic are the problem. These are the problem, right? Like, and it's almost worse because he actually believes it, right? You know,
stronger stance on rape than the British government. I think these people should face the death penalty. But to sit and say that women without evidence can go forward and just make
up. Oh, by the way, you know what's crazy? I know that I'm pausing a lot, like when it comes to rapists receiving the death penalty, because I agree with that. But it was interesting. I saw a TikTok about, I think it might have been Singapore. I think they're a super safe area. Is it a country? Or yeah, I think so. I might be the wrong area I'm thinking of. But they talked about why they don't have the death penalty for sexual assault or rape. And they're like, because if you had the death penalty for something like that, then a rapist, like an active like rapist, could be like, well, I might as well kill her or she'll testify, which I thought was very interesting. I just wanted to bring that up for context. So
against men, even though they've been repeatedly proven to destroy men's lives at will, is absolutely not.
What about a woman who was raped back in 1988 and goes to the police?
Then the man should face absolute and complete justice.
But do you understand that when that clip appears on TikTok as a clip, and all right,
as a clip, completely.
Okay, but it's still something that came out of your mouth. Do you accept that when that appears on TikTok, a lot of young, maybe not as smart as you, young men, right? Impressionable, teenagers, will read that and go, what's he saying? Is he saying 100%. That rape doesn't exist?
No, I completely. I'm not going to sit here as a professional and say that I can't be taken out of context. What I will say is that one small sentence you've taken was from a 1-hour video. Where
so like this is, just to be very clear, what's happening here is we're having a conversation about being taken out of context versus being interpreted out of context. Right. Andrew Tate's arguing that clip being put out there is just them taking him out of context. Whereas I think what Piers is trying to say, which I think is reasonable, is that young people are going to take it out of context because it's not a well thought out or explored concept. And again, keep in mind that a lot of the stuff that's getting clipped is by his fans. And they're the ones who are clipping this because they think what he's saying is super fucking based. Right. And so if your fans are getting that message out of what you're saying, you know, like that's something to be understanding, you know? You know,
I explained that, of course, rape is disgusting. Of course, everybody should be punished for their crimes regardless of when they happen. But people are not perfect, male and female. And if you give women the opportunity to destroy men's lives without evidence, there's going to be a contingent of women who will do that.
Do you think women are the property of men?
No. The point I was making...
Why have you said they are?
He has said that. He does believe that. He does believe that. He said that multiple times. Like that, not even out of context. I've watched like longer form stuff about that. Like Dave Portnoy pushed him on that, and he pretty much consistently kept saying that. He's like, yeah, if my girl does OnlyFans, I should get 80%. Like he would, which is really bizarre, but the reverse wouldn't be the same. He does believe in a level of ownership. Like he has the perspective that he thinks that like if he's in a relationship, he should be able to go out and like go on vacations with his friends, but he doesn't think that like his girlfriend should be able to go on vacation with her friends. Like really weird like ways. And he's also explicitly said that men should be like, you know, like ownership of women. He's doubled down and said like if men have the responsibility of protecting women, then he thinks that there should be a level of ownership, and that's when he compared women to like dogs and children, you know.
Because I made a religious point. I said that when a man marries a woman, the woman's father walks her down the aisle, and hands her away to the man. Traditionally, this is what it says in the Bible. I'm a religious person. I believe in God. I live in the most religious
So you do think that the woman becomes the man?
I think she takes his last name.
I mean, let's watch the clip that you said about this.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. So so what he's doing is he's like kind of upholding, like he's saying without saying it, is that like historically men, the father, give their daughters away to other men. Like it's a transfer of ownership. And again, like this is not helping him in his like ownership idea, because that is ownership. Yes, women do take the last name of men because like historically we've been like very patriarchal. And like, listen, my wife took my last name, and that's how it was going to be. I would like, I don't care if you think this is regressive, but my wife was taking my last name because I love my wife. But you know, that's like a big thing for me. She could have kept her last name as well tied to the back of it, but that's just her father's last name basically anyway. So you know what I mean? You can't escape men unless you make up your own last name. But yeah.
So that we can get it in context.
So I think my sister is my.
Okay, let me just play this clip really quick. What I was referring to, I believe this.
I believe that as a man, I should pay for the first date. I believe I should open the car door. I believe I should protect for her, provide for her. I believe if she's my woman, she should be able to come to me with her problems, and I should fix them. That makes me a sexist and a horrible person. Fine.
It doesn't.
You agree with the baseline. Everyone agrees with the foundations of what I say, but when I build on top of it, they try and pretend it's sexist.
So that part isn't sexist, I don't think. You know,
extension. If I have responsibility over her, then I must have a degree of authority. For the same reason, if I have responsibility over, and everyone's going to lose their mind, it's an example, it's only an analogy. If I have responsibility over a child, I have to have some authority. You cannot be responsible for something that doesn't listen to you. You can't be responsible for a dog if it doesn't obey you, or a child if it doesn't obey you, or a woman doesn't obey you.
The super sexist path.
Cool. Let's take a beautiful sports car. It doesn't matter. A house.
Yeah.
Land.
So he's compared women to houses, dogs and children, all things that you actually have ownership over. You own your child, okay?
Didn't help.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever I'm responsible for,
object.
I have to have a degree of authority over.
You get to a point, I would think, where there's mutual respect. So there isn't like the authority. It's a give and take on a healthy relationship.
Correct. A healthy relationship has mutual respect. So in a healthy relationship, the man will say X and the woman will say, yeah, I agree with that. Okay, I won't do it. I'm not saying it has to be a command order.
Well, he kind of is saying that. So that's what we're talking about. And the first part I agree with. Like, yeah, I think men should do these things. That doesn't mean that men have ownership over women. And also, women provide for men in a different way than men provide for women. So like men traditionally will provide like financially and from a protector perspective, though in our society, we have a relatively safe society. So it's not like super necessary, but a guy should always be ready to defend his woman. I do agree with that. But a woman provides as well. Women will generally provide like taking care of your children and taking care of your house and home in a more traditional sense. The problem is that when we talk about this exchange, we value the contribution from men more than we value the contribution from women. That's the fundamental problem. So we'll always go, and I've even done this too, where it's like, oh, so we have 3 kids and you stay home and you take care of those kids at a job that you don't turn off. And you take care of the house, you keep it clean, you keep me fed, you keep me doing this, that, and the other thing in a more traditional relationship. But it's like, well, I go to work, so and I'm supposed to protect you on the off chance that I have to fight for you. So that means that like what I'm doing is somehow greater than you consistently doing this thing, even though I would say that those two things are like equal, but they're just different, right? And we have this fundamental problem of not valuing what I would consider femininity in our society. Think about it this way. The jobs that men tend to perform tend to be better paying jobs, right? Because they're desirable. I understand. Like infrastructure jobs, like men tend to be like HVAC techs, mechanics, bricklayers, architects, et cetera, et cetera. But then look at the jobs that women provide. Things like nurses, social workers, caretakers. I'm not saying they should get paid equally, but we have a fundamental negative view on that. Doctors get paid a lot. Nurses don't get paid particularly well, and they're forced to work very long, egregious hours. We have a nurse shortage right now because we're undervaluing nurses. Women are the ones that are taking these positions that are being undervalued, and I would argue it's because we teach women in some capacity that they should be undervalued. But think about this. Let's say you go to the hospital, and a little while back, and I never told anybody this, I went to the hospital because I was having some chest pain. First people to see me were women. They were the first one to talk to me. They were the first ones to take like my EKG. They were the first ones to make me feel comfortable when I was very nervous and like frustrated about what's going on. The hey, how are you todays are that level of compassion, which I generally associate with women, is like really important. When you're in the hospital, or let's say your loved one's in the hospital, nurses don't get paid very well. They get paid okay, but for the hours and the stress that they work and the amount of egregious schooling that they have to go through, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's very difficult to become a nurse. They're effectively forced to work like very long hours, especially with COVID and the nurse shortage. They are the front lines. So I don't think that they get paid well enough for their job. And I think that considering how difficult it is to become a nurse, I don't think that like the reward is particularly good. Anyway, they're incredibly overworked, and I would argue underpaid as well. These are your first line of defense. If your mother, if your father, if your husband, if your wife, if your child goes to the hospital, the nurse will probably be a woman, and they're responsible not just for taking care of all the needs like drawing blood, giving medicine, making sure that you're okay, but like, yeah, that's a big one, making sure you're okay. Bedside manner is profoundly important. If somebody's in the hospital and they're suffering from something, a positive perspective is infinitely valuable. And we just don't think about it from that perspective. And it comes down to like a fundamental lack of like respect for femininity in our society, or what I would consider like traditional femininity of like compassion, right? Social workers are like criminally underpaid. They have master's degrees and they're getting paid like $40,000 a year, even though they have like a really positive impact on society. And we're having more conversations about how maybe we need more like police officers with social work training to show up to particular instances. That could be like profoundly beneficial, because a police officer shouldn't have to have the responsibility of showing up and exclusively dealing with somebody with like an intellectual or developmental disability. Like really think about that. You see how like there's cops that show up and they deal with people with like autism, for instance, like very like we'll say like high support needed autism. And like people are like, oh my God, that cop handled this wrong. And it's like, yeah, they did. But like, why do you expect a police officer to handle that correctly? They don't have the job training for that. Why are they the ones showing up? They should show up, but also with maybe like a social worker, like a police officer, social worker that can do that, right? Right. So like these are the conversations we need to have. Like, how do we value these jobs a little bit more in society, and how can it help? Because when you have social workers, direct support professionals dealing with people with like disabilities, when you have caretakers who are taking care of people's children, when you have nurses who are taking care of people and they're not getting paid as well, they're going to be less happy, more miserable, and do a worse job when their job is very important. A lot of people die in the hospital because they're just because of mistakes, and a lot of those mistakes happen when you are overworked and underpaid. So that's kind of the point that I'm trying to get at here. Right?
I mean, let's watch the clip that you said about this so that we can get it in context.
So I think my sister is her husband's property, yes. When a bride is walking down the aisle to marry the groom, the father walks next to her and gives her away. True or false?
But I've been married twice, as it turns out, and on both occasions.
And again, that is true, but like because we have a particular standard of doing things doesn't mean that those things should continue to be done, right? Like there's no biological necessity for that to happen. That's just like a cultural thing that we would do, and we still do that, but it's not in this like super official ownership way. It's more of just like, you know, a thing that we do like historically.
I didn't believe that the woman was being handed to me as chattel, as property.
Perhaps the way the reason I'm asked that question repeatedly, and I'm asked in a loaded way.
So would you rephrase what you said there?
Now, that's an interesting point about phrasing. The way I would say things before I was famous, I have to take personal responsibility and accept that if I make a video that 500 people see and 1% of them misunderstand it, that's not a problem. If I make a video,
it's not 1% though. It's like 90% misunderstand. I want people to be careful when even if you're a Tate fan, and I get it, you might be a Tate fan, be careful of what he's saying. Because him saying, well, I phrased that wrong, doesn't mean that he did phrase it wrong. Just want you to know, you know? It's possible that your Andrew Tate, the guy that you like so much, maybe just is a flawed individual like the rest of us, and he could do with a little bit of like, you know, more empathy and understanding of like what he's saying and how it can be wrong.
That 5 million people see, and 1% of them understand.
So specifically on that point, I think my sister is her husband's property.
She took his last name.
He's doubling down.
She joined his family. She has said it herself.
Right. So she's
still a sovereign individual. She's absolutely not.
But property means that the husband owns your sister.
Listen, my friend, if you want to argue about this, you need to go back to the Bible, to the Quran. You need to argue with religious.
No, I'm not talking about.
See, look, and listen. This is what I'm saying. Like he keeps saying, no. He thinks that women are property, and he keeps, well, go back to the Bible, go back to the Quran. These are things that, like, listen. I think religious, honestly, and I know I clown on religion a lot, is profoundly positively impactful. It is. I think that it can teach a lot of like really positive values, like family values. I think that it's great, but there are flaws to it, and some of those flaws are a regressive view on women as well as like gay people, but on like women historically, especially when you operate with religion in a very traditional sense. So constantly going back, we'll just look at religion that has been historically a bit oppressive to women. It doesn't exactly strengthen your argument. Again, it's just calling back to culture. It's like, yeah, well, look at these historical cultures that have treated women less than. Okay, well, that doesn't exactly, like, you're just upholding that.
I think in the Bible or Quran.
But that's what it says.
No, I'm asking you what you think.
I think that if a woman marries a man and she decides to take his last name, that they have different roles and responsibilities within that marriage, and I believe that.
That's not the question.
I believe the father.
Don't behave like a politician.
The father hands her to the man.
So listen, I want you to be clear about listening to what he says. What he's saying is that if a man and woman get married, a woman has a specific responsibility and a man has a specific responsibility. If you want to have a traditional relationship, God bless you, and do it. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as everything's fair and consensual. But the fact that it's not that he's saying, hey, I prefer to have a traditional relationship where a woman cooks, cleans, etc. What he's saying here is that women should be engaged in traditional relationships with men. He's trying to forcefully uphold that traditional standard. When a lot of people don't want that. Not every woman wants to be under the financial thumb of a man. A lot of women want to be able to make their own thing, to be able to be respected as an individual instead of just as a wife. And some women don't. And they want to be able to have something to fall back on in case their male spouse with money mistreats them. And so forcefully trying to uphold, or maybe the word for forceful isn't good. Excuse me, I have a little heartburn. But trying to uphold this ideology and saying that all women and men should adhere to this particular standard, that's one of the problems as well. It's not somebody with a traditional view that's like, yeah, this is how I like to operate, but you do you. It's like, this is how people should operate. Now, I'm sure that if somebody else has a different dynamic, he's not going to like scream at them and like screech, but he's going to look down upon them. And you shouldn't be looking down upon people for having like different relationships as long as they're consensual and happy.
Because I think you're a straight talker, right? You keep telling me you're a straight talker. I think my sister is her husband's property. Do you regret saying it like that?
I understand that with my newfound fame, perhaps it could be phrased differently. However, I still...
Rephrase it.
believes that a woman is given to the man in marriage. That's
Okay,
what I
so then
believe.
he believes that women are male property. Like, that's fine if you believe that. I disagree. I think it's disrespectful, but like, own it. Stop pretending that it's out of context. That's in context. You just don't like that people are calling you out for that, for being like misogynistic. Own it. If you're going to say bigoted shit, just be like, yeah, you know, just say that.
But not as property.
No, the property is the word that other people use when they ask me the question.
But as an equal partner in a loving union. That's what marriage actually means. It doesn't mean given to you as a bit of chattel.
Agreed.
So why say it?
But that's the way that people ask me the question. People say to me,
No.
they ask,
you can't
He
blame
keeps saying he agrees, but he doesn't agree with that. He doesn't agree with Piers here.
people for asking you questions. Surely, if you want to be accountable for what you said, you've got to own your responses, not blame the
agree with
question.
that
I own the
100%.
response.
You know, me ask you a question now and you say something and then say, well, actually, I blame you for
I
asking.
understand, Piers. Piers, I understand. I believe the woman is given to the man. I believe she's given away by the father. I believe she belongs to
Yeah,
the man.
you think
She
that-
belongs to the man.
Fundamentally, all right. So fundamentally, you do believe that a woman becomes a man's property.
I believe she belongs to the man in marriage, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Oh, you see,
See,
that's
not out of context. Listen, people will respect you more if you just own it. Yep, I have that idea. I think women belong to men. I disagree. I think it's toxic and I think it's dangerous. But own it. Because at least now we can go red flag. He's owning it. We know that that's wrong. But he plays this like very duplicitous game where he's like, yeah, like men own women, but I didn't really mean men own women, and like that's where the issue comes down to. And then people are able to like, you know, give you the run bullshit defense for like the dumb shit that you're saying, you know.
me is misogyny.
And you're entitled to your opinion.
Right.
Yeah,
do
it
you,
is
do you not
misogynistic.
understand why people think it is misogyny?
I understand why some people can be very offended by what I say. What they do is they take a point like that and they ignore all the other points I make the other way
Yeah,
around.
but that's why I've repeatedly asked.
You're fundamentally saying women should be owned by men. So like what, like, I mean, that's a big point to make. I'll just say.
You about that line to see if you've changed your position, but the reality is you haven't.
It's not about changing positions. I'm a full-grown adult and I stick by the things I say and I'm responsible for them.
Which by the way, is fine.
Absolutely.
But
So-
what you did
And
say
also,
at
you can change your perspective and still be an adult. You can be, you know what I mean? Like you don't. Okay.
the start of this little exchange, you said, you know, I wouldn't maybe say things the same way now that I did before I was famous, and yet, actually you've doubled down and said exactly the same thing.
on certain points.
So that is what you believe. And that's my point.
Yes,
I'm trying to work out. Look, I don't know you. We've
Correct.
just met, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to work out who Andrew Tate is and what you actually believe.
I
don't want to twist anything at all.
Then let me make it very, very clear to the camera. I believe a woman is given to the man in marriage.
But a man doesn't own a woman.
It's not, no, it's,
Unless
okay.
they literally buy them as a slave.
Well, obviously we're not talking about that. We're talking about religious, biblical marriage. We're talking about something else.
Yeah, but I'm a Christian.
Yeah,
I don't believe that
regressive.
I own my wife.
Do you believe your wife was given away to you when she took your last name?
I believe that there is a process where a father traditionally walks his daughter down the aisle and hands his daughter to this man, and they stand there and become a union of two loving
So we
people
agree.
in a partnership. No, there's no ownership involved. You're a smart guy, right? There's no denying that. You're smart. You're a good talker. I've seen a lot of the stuff. But what I don't think you quite fully understand.
No, I understand
is
very well,
when
Piers.
young, impressionable people
I understand
who
that
are
very
not
well.
as smart
No, he doesn't
see things
understand.
like, I think my sister is her husband's property, yes, and you've just reaffirmed that,
Yeah.
that belief. They think that they have the right to own women.
I understand that very well, Piers. Which
That's
is
why people think you're a misogynist.
And
Completely.
again, like that's the language that leads to these unintentional situations where like women are put into a space where like they get disrespected by a man and potentially their boundaries push in a way that's like uncomfortable for them because you uphold the idea that they should be their property in some capacity. Andrew Tate doesn't believe that women should be property in the same way that you own like a car or anything like that. He's made the comparison, which is obviously a red flag, but he doesn't believe it exactly, but he believes it enough, right? Like, so he doesn't think that men should like literally be able to walk women around on leashes and whatnot, but he does think that women should be subservient to men. They should listen to men over men listening to women. These are the things that he believes. These are like the problematic aspects that we're talking about. It doesn't give off like a positive, like it doesn't give off like a positive message, especially to young people. Or
I
any
understand
people,
all of this
really.
very well, which is why when you're saying I was backtracking, I'm not. I'm
Do you have any
Well,
regret,
he is
though, of the way you
backtracking.
phrase this stuff?
Well, this is the point I was trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is when I was not nearly as famous and I was making long format content, I was not sitting there anticipating I'd become the most Googled man on the planet and that few seconds could be taken out of context.
You went on to say
wasn't
about
out of context,
authority over
though.
women. If I have a responsibility over, I must have a degree of authority.
Yeah.
For the same reason, if I have responsibility over and people are going to use their mind, it's an example, an analogy. Responsibility over a child, I have to have some authority.
Yeah.
So you believe as part of your ownership or your property of the woman, you have authority over her.
No, I believe if you have
That's what you said.
I believe if you have responsibility over something, you have to have a degree of authority or you can't be responsible.
Yeah, but authority means, again...
But
if
again,
you're-
let's keep it clear. If you have the authority that he's talking about is like the authority to take care of a woman, right? And to protect her potentially if it comes down to it. But like, what about the authority women have over men to take care of the house and the home? There's different types of authority, but they're just valued differently in our society. And that's like the fundamental problem, is that in the traditional relationship, a lot of traditional men believe that what their role in the relationship is more valuable than the role that the woman brings. And if you can just have the traditional relationship while understanding that like what you're both contributing is both very impactful and positive and should be considered equal, then we can have like a really nice like conversation about that. This guy's a fucking idiot. You're supposed to pull this back, you stupid dipshit. Okay, sorry.
All the boss.
The point I'm
What just happened? Oh, it's there. It must be on their end. They just like
point I'm
they just kind of like glitched.
point
Okay, sorry. It's a little. I thought it was me. I was like, what just happened?
If you'll please let me finish at this point. The point I was trying to make was talking about the safety of a woman. She was walking alone at night, and I was saying, well, I wouldn't let my woman walk alone at night. And they said, well, you're not in charge of her. You don't get to decide what she does. I said, I understand, but I'm responsible for her safety.
We just watched that clip. That's not a. Wait, what? Hold on. I have to rewind.
The point I'm let you go.
Woman, you have authority over her.
No, I believe
that was the Dave Portnoy clip I showed you on the stream. They're not talking about walking like a woman not alone at home at night. In fact, Dave agrees with her in some of the in like some capacity of like respect and responsibility, but it's just like the unequal interpretation. So he's not even being honest about this particular situation.
If you ever and I was saying, well, if you'll please let me finish at this point. The point I was trying to make was talking about the safety of a woman. She was walking alone at night, and I was saying, well, I wouldn't let my woman walk alone at night. And they said, well, you're not in charge of her. You don't get to decide what she does. I said, I understand, but if I'm responsible for her safety, and I'm the person who's burdened with making sure she is safe, I have to have the authority to say, don't put yourself in unsafe situations. The two things are linked.
Well, you don't have authority.
Because I 100% would not let a woman, my wife, walk alone at night. I'm just letting you know that. Like, it's just not going to happen. Because I'm not going to like let her put herself at risk like that. I agree with that generally, but that's not his whole entire point. So
you have you can absolutely.
It doesn't mean that I own my entire wife. You know what I mean?
To say to the woman you're with, I don't think you should, but ultimately,
if she decides, then I can't force her.
Right. So authority implies that you have the ability to control someone.
No, authority implies that I have the moral right to sit and say that that's an irresponsible thing to do, and I'm responsible for.
That's not what authority means.
I accept that
you used the analogy of responsibility for a child.
My friend, these are
actually really important things.
They're important things, but you interrupt me every 5 seconds, so it's hard for me to actually explain my point.
In all honesty, so when I saw the clip online and when I saw even like the interview Piers put out, it does seem like he's interrupting him a lot, but watching the full thing, he's not really interrupting Andrew Tate. He's pressing Andrew Tate and not letting him weasel out. Realistically, even if you're a big fan of Andrew Tate, he is being very honestly weaselly in this conversation. He's doing his best not to be honest. He's constantly trying to shift what he's saying. He's being very like disingenuous, and Piers is just pushing him back on that and being like, hey, listen, like, stop trying to reframe things. I want to keep you on standard. Because think about it, he was just trying to reframe his entire thing where he's like, I don't think that men should own women. And then what does he say? Well, actually, yeah, I do. Right? He's just holding him to his point. He's not really interrupting him. He's just forcing him to answer the question. And Tate is being like very like roundabout about it. He's not owning his perspective.
The point I'm making here is very simple. You have children and you're responsible for their safety. So you're going to have authority to say, don't go out at night, perhaps because you want them to be safe.
Legal authority.
You have a legal authority.
Yeah.
Legal authority. I'm saying that if I had a woman, and the question where you've raised this soundbite from, I was asked about protecting a woman, making sure she's safe. And I would say I wouldn't want her to go out at night on her own because I'm responsible for her safety. And someone said, well, you don't have authority over her to do that. And I said, well, no, I can't force her to stay inside. But if you were to ask me, how do I protect myself at night? I would say, well, you should stay inside. That's how you should do it.
I don't have an issue with what
So
you
we
just
agree.
Said. No.
It's the semantics.
No, it's not semantics. And this is what I don't think you quite get. Why
it's not semantics. It's a thing where like Andrew Tate is doing a really good job of presenting his perspective in a way that sounds really reasonable. But when you press him on it, like he'll say, like, I think that men should be able to set boundaries is what he's saying. I don't think a man, I wouldn't let my wife go outside at night either. That's a reasonable boundary. Men have the right to set reasonable boundaries. That's what he's fundamentally saying there. But then he's following it up by, well, because of that, men should own women in some capacity, and a woman should have to listen to him always, and that's where it gets into the problem. That's the issue. He's doing a good job of framing what he's saying in a dishonest way.
There's a furore over what you say.
Are kids parents' property? I would argue yes. Kids are basically a parent's property in some capacity. Kids are dumb and not able to consent, and that's the problem with like the comparing kids to women, is because kids are stupid and they can't consent. They literally need guidance because they are children that have no concept or understanding of the world, and they're very gullible and can get hurt much easier. And they don't have the ability to like make positive, proper decisions. That's why we have to teach kids not to take candy from strangers, because they're dumb.
Right. Because the semantics point would be we're saying the same thing in different ways, but we're not. I'm saying to you that when you say I have to have some authority over a woman, I say to you, you have no right to any authority over a woman. You do over a child if it's your child, because you are the legal appointed guardian of that child.
Understood.
You're not a legally appointed guardian or authority over your wife or female partner.
Legally appointed, absolutely not. I agree. However, when it comes to things like personal responsibility.
Yeah, so when it comes to authority, so I just wanted to look it up just to be clear. The power or right to give orders, make decisions, or enforce obedience. So here's the thing. In my relationship, the dynamic that I have with my wife, I am the authoritative figure over my wife because she wants me to be. There's a consent in the authority, and there's the understanding that, like, I have to have a certain level of, like, reasonable responsibility with that, like, authority. How did I even get hit into the ground? What? Sense of responsibility with that authority. Right, but it's not something that's like forced, and like that's the understanding. It's like a more consensual thing, but like people in traditional relationships believe that like there shouldn't be, like it should be an absolutist authority, and that's the problem, rather than like a consensual authority type of a situation.
Personal safety, men, largely by society, are accepted. We're the protectors and providers. We can sit here and pretend that in the world we live in, if me and my wife were walking down the street and men were to come up and try and attack us, I wouldn't be the one fighting. But we both know in reality I would.
Right.
I have a degree of responsibility to protect her. So if I have a degree of responsibility to protect her physically, then the point I'm trying to make is I will do my best to make sure she's never putting herself in unsafe
You
situations.
wish you hadn't used the word authority.
The authority is something that she would give to me. She would come to me and say, how can I make sure I'm as safe as possible?
But I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to point out that's not what authority means.
If someone gives, a person can give
voluntary authority is not authority.
No, but that's the point. If
a woman,
well, I disagree with that. I just don't think that he's being honest about this interpretation. That's more what I would say. I don't think that he's being like particularly honest about his interpretation of it. Based on what he said in the past.
Andrew, so.
Piers, if a woman comes to me and says, I want you to keep me safe, she is handing me authority for her safety.
Coming up, more from Andrew Tate.
I figured it's going to skip through the commercials. Wow, there's a lot of... Okay.
One woman on. Welcome back to a special edition of Piers Morgan Uncensored. Andrew Tate, one-on-one. Do you respect women?
Absolutely. Why wouldn't I?
Do you think that 18, 19-year-old women are more attractive than 25-year-old women?
I think there's attractive people. That's a loaded question. I don't know.
Well, it's not really, is it?
I can't.
You know why I'm asking it?
Of course I do. But I can't sit here and
say... For the
benefit
benefit of viewers who don't know why I'm asking, you said this. In general, this is also one of the reasons men find you...
That seems like a pretty simple answer, or you can give a nuanced answer to that. Okay.
Youth attractive. You want to blow up the internet? I'll blow up the internet right effing now. The reason 18 and 19-year-olds are more attractive than 25-year-olds is because they've been through less dick. People say, oh, you can't say that, but yes, I can. A 19-year-old is more attractive than a 26-year-old woman, and I'll tell you why. Because that 26-year-old has talked to more guys, been to the club more times, been effed and dumped more times, more arguments, more mess, more for me to clean up. That is misogyny.
Why?
Because you are encouraging a mindset about 25-year-old women that makes them...
So here, like I briefly talked about why this is a misogynistic take before, but I'll like reinforce it. So first and foremost, there's a pattern from Andrew Tate of, excuse me, of asserting that women with higher body counts tend to be less valuable to men in relationships and society. Because right now, this can be true, but understand that it goes for both men and women, right? Again, statistically speaking, both men and women with higher body counts tend to report less happy relationships after a longer period of time. Okay, and so it's the double standard upheld that's a problem. Number two is that he has a problem with asserting that women that he interacts with is a representative of all women in the entire world in general. He interacts with younger girls for purely sexual engagements. Generally speaking, that's what it is. And because realistically speaking, considering Andrew Tate has a lot of money, a lot of fame, he should have no problem finding like a decent wife. But the reality is that women think he's a big red flag and they don't care about money enough to compromise those values. It's a reason why he's like struggles to be in a relationship. These are the problems with what he's saying. Realistically speaking, older women, more mature people tend to be better relationship partners than like younger people. You're going to have a better relationship with somebody who's like, well, I mean, obviously you don't want to be like 18 talking to a 25-year-old, but I personally would say, I think that 25-year-olds would be more attractive than 18-year-olds because they have more life experience and they have a better, like more level head on their shoulders. They understand more what they want, right? Just because they're older, that goes for both men and women. It's not like it's not a double standard that I'm setting. This is what I'm saying. But again, he values women for their bodies almost exclusively and doesn't really value women for anything else. I remember seeing interviews where he was like berating women who wanted to be like a nurse and a woman who wanted to be like a doctor. Because they're gonna regret putting their relationship aside, or love life aside, just so that they can have their own personal goals. They'd be happier if they just would have a kid. These are like the types of like sexist ideologies where like not all women want to just be fucking baby makers, right? These are the ways in which like these things become like a double standard. They become sexist. He has no value for a woman who wants to like better herself and have like her own job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? These are some of the problems with the things that he says.
Found out to be.
I just want to be explicitly clear. I'm not putting any words in his mouth. I need, because like I need you to understand this something. I've done I think a pretty solid job of showing as much context as possible for a lot of the things that I've been saying. I've been showing clips. I've been going in detail. I've been being very charitable. I need you to understand. I've watched more Andrew Tate than you because like I've decided that this is my job. And so, like, I know a lot of you guys like Tate. You don't have to dislike him just because of what I'm saying, but you should hold him to a higher standard if you want him to be an actual good content creator. That's something that you should, because you shouldn't agree with a lot of the things that he's saying. But you guys, instead of going, you know what, I like Andrew Tate, but I disagree with this, you're doubling down, and you're allowing him to be sexist on women. It's okay if he just has some bad ideologies, but you have to call out the bad ones, even if you like the good ones.
Infinitely less desirable than 18, 19-year-olds, and having effectively been having too much sex to be taken in a more respectful way.
Well, firstly, even if that was the case, that wouldn't be misogyny.
But what did you mean by what you said?
That's not misogyny because it's not anti-women. I'm saying that an 18 or a 19-year-old woman would be more desirable.
Pretty anti-25-year-old woman.
Anti-25-year-old woman we can argue, but not misogyny.
Well, that's misogyny.
No. It's
being anti any woman at all is misogyny.
Not when I'm saying that women are beautiful and attractive at a certain age and saying the age.
You're saying 18, 19-years are more attractive than 25.
Well, then ageist perhaps, but misogynistic absolutely.
Is that not. But you just accepted it was misogyny.
No, I didn't. You said it was misogyny. I'm telling you, no, it's not.
So you don't think if you're
this was not like a good representation of a clip from Andrew Tate, I'll tell you that. I mean, from Piers Morgan. It doesn't exactly. I think Piers thought. I overall agree with Piers Morgan here. I think that he thought what he was saying was like, oh yeah, like really solid, but he wasn't pushing back in probably like the best way.
Slightly hateful things about a 25-year-old.
That's not slightly hateful.
Well, it is. You think you say that to a woman's face if she's 25?
It's not slightly hateful.
So you would go up to a 25-year-old woman and tell her exactly what I just read out.
Why would I walk up to a rant?
I would like Piers to like let Andrew Tate basically speak himself into a hole and like be a little bit more explicit about what he's saying, rather than like trying to like assert something on there that hasn't been explicitly asserted in this situation.
Because you said it in public on the internet, and it's been listened to and watched by millions and millions of young impressionable boys.
Correct. There was a large panel. There was a conversation. There was hours long of conversation. There were feminists attacking men for toxic masculinity and attacking me and saying things, and I said things back which were going to antagonize.
But I think,
which you've done yourself a bunch of times.
I think a lot of allegations of toxic masculinity are not toxic.
Correct.
I do think that kind of sentence that I just read out, that paragraph, is actually toxic. If you genuinely mean that, and you say you wouldn't say it to a woman's face, but you said it in public about women of that age.
So again, really quick, if he says, I think 18-year-olds are more attractive than 25-year-olds, that's fine. But he's not saying that. He's saying fundamentally he thinks that 18-year-olds are more attractive than 25-year-olds because 18-year-olds, and he's making this like very broad perspective. Most 18-year-olds or a lot of these 25-year-olds have gotten a lot of dick and been run through too much, and they're less valuable because of that. He's not saying, hey, I prefer younger women because I prefer younger women with like lower body counts. He's not saying that. He's making an assertion that all women are basically the same. And if a woman did that to a man, you would rightfully be mad at them. And then he's operating from that capacity. That's the problem with what he's saying. He's not just saying, hey, this is my preference. He's saying this is the status. This is what the status quo should be. You have to understand that. Okay.
I think that's misogynist, and I think you probably do too.
I don't think it's misogynistic. I understand why it can be insulting.
You wouldn't say it to a woman's face.
Well, it depends. You're making it out like I'm walking around the street going up to random 25.
Well, effectively, you're doing it to tens of millions of people online. There's no difference.
Not at all. We're discussing a topic. We were discussing the ideal age of a man.
Should young boys, right, in their teens, are you comfortable that they would have that mindset? Be honest.
I think that young boys in their teens lack life experience. They lack nuance, and they need to be very, very careful what they're digesting online, whether it's my content or anybody else's.
Right, but you have to be careful with the way that you make your content digestible. First of all, you're not really helping yourself with your interpretations on what you're saying. Like it's not making it any better. But you can't put the responsibility on children to be more responsible. You know, like I understand that the parents should do a better job at like, you know, monitoring their children and whatnot. But like what you're saying is not good. It's toxic. It gives young men the wrong idea. Like you can't just be like, oh, it's everybody else's problem. But what I'm saying, people are just saying that you're bad if because you are. Your ideology is not great.
Agree about a lot of things. But when I read that kind of thing, I'm like, how much of that is you? How much of that is some act? Do you regret saying stuff like this?
I don't.
And actually, do you see it as weakness to admit you shouldn't have said something like that?
No, I don't live with regret. I think what's happened is that, like I said, long format content, arguments with feminists, arguments with the toxic masculine crowd, arguments with the left, and they're going to take a small clip, small sentence from ours, and they're going to try and paint me as a.
But I'm not left or right.
I don't know what you are, Piers.
Exactly. That's my point. No, that's my point.
And I understand. and you're doing exactly as I knew would happen on this interview, which is because you're a busy man. You're not going to watch hours and hours and hours of video.
Actually, I have watched hours and hours.
Well, yeah, you can't really expect somebody. See, this is a problem, and a lot of content creators will fall into this trap in general, or like public figures will do this. You know, is that there is an expectation, an unjustifiable expectation of a lot of content creators of like, well, you need to watch more of my stuff, but you can't expect people to sit down and watch tens and tens of hours of your content. Some people should, obviously. Like I'm a commentary content creator. I've watched a lot of his stuff, so I know more like what he's talking about. But like for you to be like, well, that's just what people are putting out about it. It's like, yeah, because that's what you're saying. And again, you need to understand that you have a level of responsibility for the way that you say things. So even if you're being taken out of context, and as you're being pushed by Piers, it's clear that you're not really being taken out of context. A lot of that is, it's still a level of that is your responsibility, and you should own that more instead of just trying to deflect and say like, well, young boys should be more careful about what they consume online, which is effectively what he just said before, which I think is a kind of like a wild thing to say.
As a video, and I'm going to come to the stuff where I agree with you, and I'm going to come to the stuff about your censorship, which I have issues with. So this is, you know, it's a long interview, right?
Sure.
I just thought off the top, you said to me, and you were quite bold about it. Well, go on, then let's go through this.
And you should keep going. I will sit here and stand by what I said. I believe that
on that, I just read to you then.
Yeah.
Do you wish you hadn't said that?
I understand how it's been misconstrued. I understand how it's been weaponized against me. Do I regret it because it's been weaponized and used against me? Well, that's slightly annoying. Did I at the time mean what I said in the context of the conversation, which obviously you're not familiar with and the people at home are not familiar with?
What's the context of the conversation?
The 25-year-old women that just talked to more guys, been to the club more times, been effed and dumped more times, more arguments, more mess, more for me to clean up.
Well, there's a whole bunch of context and conversation around that's been missed, and I
don't think I'm missing much context.
Bring it up.
I encourage people who are interested to go watch it.
Well, that's the problem. See, this is a problem I find too. So he's saying that there's an issue with the context and the way that's being delivered. Okay, so explain the context. But instead of explaining the context, like, well, you should go fish it out yourself. I think it would be reasonable to expect you to explain it now. Explain the context of that. Because again, you're making a broad term perspective on women. It's a sexist perspective. Why not own it? Excuse me. If you truly own it, use this platform as a way to change people's minds. But I would argue that the context isn't going to change much because, again, it's not really taken out of context. He just wants to assert that so that like people that aren't engaging critically in what he's saying are just going to use it as like a very like a broad defense for Tate, rather like then a lot of people are going to do that. They're going to be like, well, it's out of context because Tate said so. Well, how is it out of context? He won't deliver his perspective, and I guarantee you that you didn't go back and try to watch that interview. He didn't even say the name of what the interview is, by the way. So he's not even like allowing people to like be like, yeah, go watch the interview. It's blah 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 blah. You know. It's so people that aren't engaging critically that are looking for confirmation bias are just going to double down on what Tate said. And I know it's going to be some of my audience, but I would encourage you to engage critically with what he's saying.
I mean, I've just read out 3 sentences on the bounce there. I don't think there's any context I'm missing. I mean, you made it pretty clear what you think about the difference between 18 and 90-year-old women.
I wasn't talking about myself, even. I was talking with a Muslim guy who was on the panel, and he was explaining how youth is very valued in most parts of the world, and why virginity is valued in most parts of the world. The feminists were arguing against it. The conversation...
Well, yeah, virginity and youth are valued, but like those things don't need to be valued. And again, even in this conversation, Andrew Tate has been very explicit about upholding traditional ideas like, well, a father gives a woman away, right? So that means that men should own them. It's like, okay, just because a standard has set, a social, cultural standard is set, doesn't mean that it needs to continue to be set. So if your argument for why something should be the way it is, well, because it is the way it is, that's not a critical, reasonable argument to make. That's like if and not to be extreme, but if I was like, yeah, slavery should exist because it has existed for a long time. It's like, well, that's not actually a good argument. Like, that's not good at all, right? So...
has been misunderstood. They've taken this clip of it and it's been weaponized and used against me. I understand that it's because I'm now the most famous Google person on the planet. It's inconvenient, sure. But I'm definitely not a danger to women in any regard. I date women 25, 26, 27 years old all the time. None of them are offended by the things
I don't think you're a danger to women. I think
they might be offended by what you're saying. But like, yeah, that's fine. Like, so that's okay that women date you. It's okay that like not every woman has to believe that Andrew Tate is bad for women, but that doesn't make them right. It doesn't make me right either. But I think I'm doing a much better job at actually explaining why I'm right. You know, so
danger if it concerns you. The danger is the influence you have on young men to have this kind of mindset about women. And that's really where I'm trying to get to what you really believe and how much you've just shot off because you think it's like entertaining and you haven't really given it much thought. And whether now you're a bit older and you've had all the fallout, whether part of you is thinking, actually, if I had, as Joe Rogan says, if you hadn't said stuff like this, you'd probably still be on all these platforms. You'd be massively more popular, massively more famous, massively richer. So I'm really just trying to get to, on the blatantly misogynist stuff, do you just wish you hadn't said it?
With great power comes great responsibility. It was certainly said before the great power came. It's inconvenient to a degree. However, like I said at the time, with the context of the conversation, I know that I'm not saying things which I believe to be detrimental to the world. However, they've been misconstrued and they've been misunderstood.
And I think that's reasonable. I think that, again, there are a lot of people who operate where they're like, yeah, I think Andrew Tate thinks, like, people think Andrew Tate actually thinks that he's harmful. That would be preposterous. Andrew Tate's like the mechanics I used to work with, you know what I mean? He's just a regular dude. He's not that bad of a guy, I don't think. He's a hardworking dude. I mean, he became like a fucking kickboxing world champion. There are obviously things I disagree with him. You know, the selling of porn is one of them, the webcam shit, especially since he advocates against that. And with ideas, and he doesn't think he's harmful. He doesn't think he's toxic. He's not a bad guy, but that doesn't mean that what he's saying is good, right? Like a lot of people, I think most people are unintentionally say bad things. We all do it. Like I'm not going to pretend that I haven't done that as well. You know what I mean? But that's what I think that's, if people would understand that Andrew Tate isn't trying to be a bad guy, I think we could have a much more productive conversation.
Would you say, I'm sorry for saying that?
Well, I wouldn't want anyone to be offended by anything I say, but I say things that offend. And this is the thing that's interesting, Piers. Please let me finish.
You're behaving like a politician. But hang on, you can say I'm interrupting.
You do,
but you're answering a different question to the one I asked you. So, as an interviewer, you're
behaving. Sure. Okay,
Okay, you accept that. Let's accept we both got on. Okay. So again, my point is simply, if a 26-year-old woman is watching this and has heard those comments, would you just say to her, "Look, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that"?
No, I won't. I will say that I am sorry that offends you. However, there's a large contingent of the world.
That doesn't mean you're sorry.
No, I'm not sorry. That's the point I'm making. I'm sorry if that offends you. However, there's a large contingent of the world that believe that, and I was mediating for a conversation.
Parts of the world that believe.
Again, when you keep saying, well, there's a part of the world that believes that, that's not a valid argument for anything. Just being like, well, people believe that. That doesn't mean anything. If I was like, yeah, I think ghosts are real, and somebody was like, well, I don't think so. It's like, well, people believe it. You would obviously, ghosts might be real, but that's obviously not proof ghosts are real just because other people believe ghosts are real, right? That's the problem with his argument. He might have an argument. I disagree, but he's not actually engaging with any argumentative skills. So, like, let's say everything that Tate's saying is true, right? But he has no reasonable argument for why it's true. So it doesn't seem like so even if he's right, it's like he's accidentally incorrect. He's accidentally correct. If your perspective is like, yeah, well, a lot of people believe this, so I'm right, that means that you're just a sheep following the herd. You know what I mean?
Believe that about 26-year-old women are parts of the world where women are not allowed out on their own.
That's a conversation.
They have to wear full burqas.
It is a conversation.
They're not allowed to drive cars.
That's nothing to do with it.
But is that the kind of?
But it does, because those are the people you're referencing when you say the rest of the world is doing that. So if you're saying okay. This is what you're talking about. When you constantly say, hey, I think that women should be led by men because a lot of the world does that, you're endorsing that behavior. You're endorsing the behavior of forcing women into submission around the world because you're constantly referencing them in a positive capacity. So you can't be like, well, it's a conversation I have, but I don't want to. It does have everything to do with you because you're upholding that actively by constantly referencing people like that and be like, yeah, well, that's the standard and that should be the standard and it's the standard. And well, you know that they're being forced to do things they don't want to. Oh yeah, but that has nothing to do with me. Well, it does because you're consistently referencing it as the thing.
For women that you,
I was mediating a conversation.
No, I'm asking you what you think.
I don't live in a country where that happens.
You're using that as the excuse for why you're not sorry for saying it.
It's not an excuse.
Is that there are parts of the world where this is fine? So my question to you is, well, do you think it's fine?
I don't think it's fine. I live in a world where...
You don't think it's fine?
This
isn't that hard, Andrew. You can simply say, Piers, you know what? With the benefit of hindsight, I wish I hadn't said it like that. And if a 26-year-old woman's watching, I'm sorry I said that because that actually is blatantly misogynist. And even though that's a view held by other parts of the world, it's not a view I share. Now, I would respect you more if you said that.
So somebody in the chat said, women wanting to date older men of a certain age, are they misandrists? No, I don't think so. I don't think that Andrew Tate is fundamentally misogynistic for wanting to date younger women either. It's the rationale of why he wants to date younger women, and specifically making the assertion that that is all women. This is what I'm saying, where like you're somebody who's not engaging critically what happens. You're looking for a confirmation bias because you're an Andrew Tate supporter. You have to understand that. And I've been pretty explicitly clear about like all of these things, so I'm not going to reiterate. But like again, he's making the broad term generalization that all women that are 25 are less valuable than all women that are 18 because they're less attractive and they've had more dick. Where he's not valuing like potentially their achievements. He's also not understanding that not all women are going to the clubs and getting fucked all the time. It's this incredibly intense, aggressive double standard that he's upholding, and I think that you're making it very you're diminishing it to a really basic argument so that you don't have to think about it. And if you're not going to do that, that's okay. But understand that like what you're saying isn't super valuable if you're not going to engage critically in what's happening right now. You don't have to engage critically, but you should. You should.
Yeah.
But if you try and say, well, it's said in other parts of the world, so I'm not sorry.
I think
that doesn't tell me what you think.
Then you need to understand why my content existed in the first place.
Okay.
My content existed because I tried my very hardest to be an absolute and utter realist, especially with uncomfortable truths.
Okay.
I was pointing out that very uncomfortable
truth. Is that a truth?
It's an uncomfortable truth in many parts of the world. It's not a truth that I'm happy about.
Again, in many parts. Okay, but you're upholding it because you think that that's true.
It's not true.
Hang on. You're doing it again. What do you mean that's a truth in other parts of the world? That's what you said. You're not talking about another part of the world.
He agrees
you're
with
talking about
this.
what you believe is the difference between 18 and 90-year-olds and 26-year-olds.
I was talking about
your belief.
I was talking about what the people on the panel believe the difference is.
So what do you think?
So yeah, what do you think
The difference is?
I think the difference is age.
What's the difference then?
Well, then a 26-year-old's older than a 19-year-old.
And so you stand by what you said about talking to the guys, being to the club more times, being left to dump more times. Well, do you believe that or not?
No, there's plenty of 26-year-old women who have been with one man or virgins,
right.
of course.
Okay.
So you don't believe that?
I don't think that the age is the only thing that's going to decipher how many men or women.
So if you don't actually believe what you said, just say sorry.
It's not about not believing what I'm saying. It's about you understanding that there's large conversations going on.
You were saying what you think.
The problem here is that Andrew Tate is, again, he's engaging in like a dishonest like tactic here. And he's trying to like wiggle his way out of what's going on. So he said a thing about women, and then he's constantly saying other people in the world believe that, so that's why it's right. And then when he's pushed on, he's like, well, I didn't say I believe that. That's just what it is. And then when he's pushed again, he's like, well, I do believe that. And he's like, well, there's a greater conversation to have. For sure. So have it. But instead of making like a nuanced perspective, he's constantly doubling back, dialing back, changing his perspective. And he's done this earlier in the conversation when he was pressed on what he had said about women earlier. And understand that like he was being dishonest about his interpretation, and then he ended up just doubling down and saying like, yeah, I think men should own women. So he's not being explicit or clear about what he's saying. That's like a problem. It's hard to trust him with what he's saying because he's being so dishonest so often.
I feel like you're trying to pin me down.
If it's not what you believe, just say I don't believe that.
What part wouldn't I believe?
Well, you tell me which part you don't believe. There's the sentence. Which part would you now say you don't believe?
I believe that 25-year-old women perhaps have had, because they've been alive longer, maybe have had more partners, but I don't believe that makes them a bad person.
Right.
But why do you think that it makes him a less valuable partner? Because that's what you're saying.
That the way you phrased it makes every 25-year-old
I understand.
feel a bad person.
No, I don't think so.
Of course you do. You're not stupid. Come on.
Piers.
Andrew, you're not stupid. You know what that sounds like to any 25, 26-year-old woman.
Completely. And
right? So you have maligned every 25, 26-year-old woman with that statement. And I'm simply asking you, to all those who are not of the type of women that you've described here, are you sorry?
I don't want anybody to be offended by anything I say. I want to be a positive force in the world. I don't want anybody to hear what I say and make them feel bad about themselves. I want all people to live righteous and good, whether they're male or female.
Coming up, more from Andrew Tate.
Talk TV.
Welcome back to a special edition of Piers Morgan Uncensored. Andrew Tate, one-on-one. Have you ever been in love?
Yeah.
How many times?
Plenty. I believe in love between men and women.
A real love,
Yeah.
How many times would you say?
Let's say 10. I mean, I've been in love, and I certainly believe that men and women, when they work together, it's the most beautiful force on the planet. I believe in family. I believe in children. I believe in...
Why are you single?
I'm not single.
Well, you're not married. Something.
Well, if I was married, the last thing I would do is advertise it to the feral psychopaths on the internet. So
I'm not a feral psychopath.
Well,
you called me friend earlier.
Can be debated.
I don't think that he's married. Maybe he is. I think that. I mean, like, there's nothing ever indicates that he was married. This is like a weird thing. Is he single or is he married? I don't understand. Okay, I don't think he's married at all. I think that this is a really easy way for him to not like have to actually, because what Piers is setting up here is he's setting up like he's like, yeah, are you single or are you married? Hold on. Okay, so what Pierce is setting up here is like, hey, listen, you're single and like you're 35, and it's interesting that you're putting up relationship advice even though you're not in a long-term relationship. Right. And then Andrew Tate's like, well, you don't know that. And it's like, well, so be clear about that. Why are you know what I mean? And then he's like, well, people are crazy, so I can't be clear about that. And it's like, okay, so like now we can't have the honest conversation. He's not in a relationship, I don't think, in any long-term capacity. He's just kind of like playing this off so he doesn't have to engage in it.
Piers. But the point I'm making as a whole is that
do you want to get married?
No, but we have to all feed into each other, Piers. I'm talking about protecting.
It's not a hard question.
No, but I'm talking about protecting and providing for a woman. I'm talking about a man being responsible for her safety.
I understand.
So of course I believe in men and women. Of course I believe in love. Of course I believe in marriage. Of course I believe in family.
No,
the idea that I don't believe in these things.
I didn't
is
ask
crazy.
you if you believed in it. I asked you if you're going to get married.
One day, absolutely.
You'd like to.
If I'm not married already, I will be married one day. If I'm not.
Okay. You might be secretly married.
I could be married, correct.
Why would you not tell me either way?
Why would I advertise to the feral psychopaths of the world who have tried their very best to destroy me for an opinion about my private life and the things that are most sacred to me? Why?
So here's the thing. I could understand what he's saying if the problem is, right, with what he's saying, is like he hasn't announced previously if he is or isn't married. So like, if I'm pretty sure he's not married, you know, I can understand like maybe now he's having that perspective. Maybe he just got married. I don't know. And now he doesn't want to represent that to the world. Doubt that he's married. Pretty sure he's just full of shit. But like if he was married from the start before he understood how feral and psychopathic people are on the internet, and they can be, right? Then that would be different. But like, you know, now it's like after the fact. It's like, okay, well, what, are you actually married? Like, obviously not in a long-term capacity. You would have told us that unless you're hiding it for some weird reason. But you've shared every other fucking detail of your life. You know, you shared with the internet your like aggressive sexual life. You leaked that on the internet with that game with that girl for like from Big Brother. You know what I mean? So like, you're not exactly fucking shy about your personal life.
You said you were married, everyone would hate you.
I don't know about people hate me. It's about me understanding that I'm a hard target, but I am very, very protective of the people I care about.
Right. But you believe in the concept of marriage?
Completely. That's what we were talking about the whole time.
What do you think?
We talked about a man giving a woman away. Okay. I believe in marriage more than anybody. In fact, I believe in marriage. No, please. Okay. I believe in marriage in the traditional sense. I believe a man has a duty to stand up and be a real man. I believe that the problem with the world today that we are facing is that not enough men are sticking to the age-old ways of masculinity. I believe that me standing up and saying a man must protect a woman and provide for her, so he needs to make sure that she's safe. He needs a degree of authority to protect her. I have no
problem with...
But this is the thing. It's like, I agree with that as well. The problem is, again, is the dynamic. It's like, I believe that a man should stick up for a woman. I believe in that as well. I think a lot of people do. The problem is that he's saying that as well as saying that he thinks that women should be under the thumb of men, and he's been pretty clear about that in this conversation. And again, it fundamentally comes from like the lack of value from the contribution of women versus men. I talked about that before. You know, this is the issue. And like, it sounds really good the way he's saying it now, but when you press him on it, it's like, yeah, I think that we should have a traditional relationship too, but I also value the perspective that women give in my relationship. So my woman's not my fucking property. We're mutual, you know, own each other, but she's not like my exclusive property in some capacity. This is the problem with what he's saying here.
We do have a problem with it. And that's the world we're in now.
Andrew, I'm over here.
Sure.
I don't have a problem with what you just said. Here's where my problem comes, right? There are a lot of clips of you floating around on the internet, as you know. One of them has you saying, bang out the machete, boom in her face, grip her by the neck, shut up, bitch. In another, you say slap, slap, grab, choke, shut up, bitch, sex.
So my understanding of that clip, I'm pretty sure I watched it, and I'm going to be a little generous to Andrew Tate. I believe that clip with the machete was what happened is he was talking about how he has a machete by his bed for home defense, right? And he was like, some people ask me, am I afraid that if I cheat on a girl, will she use that against me, right? Which, you know, kind of uphold the idea that cheating is okay. But he's like, I'm not afraid of a woman. Even if she has a machete, I'd kick her ass. Women suck, kind of, or like women aren't the strongest men, which is like true. I get it. So that's like an into his defense. So he could argue that and be like, yeah, I was just like being a little satirical, a little over the top about how I have a machete in my house and about how somebody asked me if a woman found it because she hurt me if I cheated on her, and I was just being a little extra. That's all he has to say there, right? That's all he has to say there. So let's see what he says.
When people see those clips and hear you say those things,
agreed.
Well, I don't think that it's not hard to misunderstand it.
It is.
You might say that it's consensual. Other people would say whether it's consensual or not. That's a very ugly way to talk about women.
Completely. Now let's
hitting them with machetes.
No, watch the whole video. It's a girl coming at me with a machete and me saying, here, slap the machete out of her hand. She's attacking me. So you don't understand. This is the exact point.
I do understand.
No, people don't watch them in full. And this is actually what's interesting. And please don't interrupt me on this point. Social media has changed in modern times. YouTube 5 years ago was 5, 6, 7, 8 minute long videos. Now we have TikTok, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Stories. Now anything you produce.
So yeah, like even like he did a bad job at representing what he said. Like he did a very bad job at being. He did a bad job at like when I explained it. You guys are like, oh, that makes sense. Like I don't think that we should chastise Andrew Tate for this clip. I think of the way that I explained it. But the way he explained it, he's like, I was just talking about if a woman was coming at me with a machete. It's like, okay, well, that's not exactly what's going on here. It's not exactly the best fucking interpretation of what's happening.
Form is cut down to very, very short form. They're interested in clicks. They're interested in engagement. They find
But
the
you
most.
benefited from all
Find
that.
the most controversial clips.
Yeah,
they can.
it's his
on
own
purpose.
people doing
You
that.
benefited from all that.
Everybody benefits from social media.
It's his guys doing that because they think that it's funny and based. Okay, he has to stop playing this game where they're taking him out of context to be negative towards him when they're actually doing it because they think that it's cool. Okay.
Was it the Hustler? What is it?
I had an online school
called
Hustlers University.
Right. And their whole job was to promote your clips, make you rich and famous. So you benefited from this system, the one you now profess to hate. You benefited from.
I never said I hated
you
it.
You clickbaited like the best of them.
I never said I hated it. I'm saying what happened. I don't hate it. I don't hate social media. I think it's a very powerful force. I don't hate the social media. I'm saying
the point is, I think you can talk. Look, you can talk to girlfriends of yours, maybe a secret wife. I don't know. It's entirely up
or
to
two.
Or two. Maybe you've got 10 wives. That's your business. 10, I don't care, right? My only thing is,
I mean, if you're saying that you have 2 girlfriends, I will say kind of hypocritical. You're talking about how you believe in marriage, of the traditional marriage, and then you're talking about having 2 girlfriends. This is one of the problems I have with manosphere guys who will constantly reference religion when it comes to picking up the regressive aspects of religion. They're all over like, yeah, religion's really good, blah, 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 blah. But then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, also, by the way, I think you should be able to cheat on women. And it's like, okay, what the fuck? That's not you can't reference religion and saying like, I want to uphold traditional standards and then talk about how men should be able to fuck around with other women. Because religion is very, very adamant about not cheating, okay?
What you do in private. If it's consensual between you and another woman, you can do what you like, right? It's your life. I believe in freedom and liberty. It's when you say it in public, it's the influence that this kind of thing has on young men.
Agreed.
Right? And I speak with someone with 3 sons, right? Who are, by the way, they're intrigued by you. They're fascinated, right? You're a big thing in that world of TikTok and so on. So they all are aware of you and what you say. So they're all looking. And when they see things like the machete thing, I get the context because I'm a 57-year-old guy who's been around the block a bit, and I can get what you said, and you responding to a particular scenario which you'd created where a woman.
But it can be misunderstood.
I understand. So my point
it's interesting because I was about to criticize Piers here.
Scenario which you'd created where a woman.
But it can be misunderstood.
So I was about to criticize Piers here because I didn't think that he understood the context of what had happened, but he does. And I was going to be like, well, why wouldn't you bring up the context of the scenario if you understood the scenario? Piers was about to go into the specifics of it and be very charitable. He was just waiting for Andrew Tate to like give his perspective on it, and then Andrew Tate cut him off. So I you know what I mean? Because he should be like, make sure you're honest about the interpretation of the clip, but you should like press him on how he feels about it. You know?
I understand. So my point to you is, given that you know it can be misunderstood, do you regret saying things like this on camera where it can be disseminated by less intelligent young males who think that is actually what they should be doing to women?
And finally, we get to the point of the issue, which is the point I tried to make at the very beginning. When I made a video before I was famous that got 500 views, me being concerned that 1% of people will misunderstand it was not relevant. Where you start getting 5 million views a video, 50 million views a video, 1% of people misunderstand.
Again, it's not 1%. It's the overwhelming majority of people are misinterpreting. It's your own people misinterpreting you. Like it's not just 1% of people. It's your own guys. It's not 1%. It's most people. You're not doing a good job of being concise. Well, you actually are. You're just kind of pretending that you don't feel a particular way about things, but
it doesn't change what
no, it doesn't. But it becomes a much larger problem. So with great fame comes great responsibility.
Right.
So
that's your responsibility.
now that I'm famous, do I say things the same way as I did back before I was famous? Absolutely not.
Right.
As neither would you or nearly any other famous person on the planet.
So
once you become famous, you have to be a lot more careful with how you say things.
I understand. So my logical follow-up to that remains, do you regret then saying it the way you said it?
I can't live in regret by saying something before I was famous on a camera which barely anybody watched. And
yes, you can. You'd be like, yeah, I regret saying it that way. I didn't mean for it to come off in like a negative way. Why not just say that? Just own it. It's so weird. Just say that.
I became famous afterwards. That would be a very asinine way to view the world.
Do you stand by?
You don't have to chastise yourself for saying something and people taking it out of context. You could be like, yeah, I wish I said it differently, knowing what I know now, but I don't think I should be berated for it. That's fair. But like he says this weird thing. I don't think I should have to say anything at all. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about, brother?
I can't live in regret because I didn't know I was going to become the most famous man on the planet.
You see, one of the problems that people have with you is that they think you have a malevolent influence on young people. This was the excuse that was put out by the big tech companies.
Excuse being the key word.
Well, it may be, actually. You know, I intrinsically, I have a problem with censorship. I don't think Donald Trump should be banned from Twitter, for example, because the Ayatollah of Iran remains on Twitter and other social media platforms. And whatever I think of you, you're not the Ayatollah of Iran. Right? So to me, there's got to be perspective here. And I don't understand the inconsistency by what companies like Twitter, how they treat the leader of Iran and someone like you. It seems to me they're much more draconian on people like you than they are with people who perhaps should not be allowed platforms. But generally, I don't really agree with no platforming people. But I think what's interesting talking to you is it seems to me like you have gone on a bit of a journey of self-awareness about the impact of some of the stuff you said in the past. And you have said you wouldn't say it again in the same way. Now, you may not want to express regret for that, but it shows me that at the very least, you have evolved to somebody who recognizes that these can be quite damaging in the way that you said them.
Completely. As a professional and as an adult, it would be stupid for me to sit here and say that now that I'm the most famous man on the planet, my words do not have more impact than they did before.
Next up. In Benson, Andrew Tate, one-on-one. You talk about people don't want to see men dressed up in dresses. Transgender.
That's not exactly what I said.
What did you say?
I said the reason I am so popular and I'm so famous is that there's a large contingent of men who don't want to wear makeup, who still want to make money, go to the gym, be strong, drive a fast car, be traditionally masculine, and don't want to be shamed for that, and they don't want to be called toxic for that. That is the reason I'm so massively famous. That is what I said.
What do you think of transgender people?
That's nothing to do with me. I'm not transgender, and I don't understand the issue like they do. When they attacked me, they lump a whole bunch of things into.
I think there was like a clip that came out about Tate and like his perspective on trans people. I don't think I saw it. Andrew Tate trans. See if I could find it, because I'm not going to be able to have like a whole lot of insight on this conversation if I don't know what he said.
What are his vast global audiences being subjected to? Insights like this.
So a woman can't go around people and pretend it's the same as a man running around people. It's absolutely not the same. A man can only cheat if he loves someone else. If I have a woman who I truly love and I go out and I come back to her and I don't care about her and I only love my girl, that's not cheating. That's exercise.
Well, that's okay. That's obviously very sexist for obvious reasons, double standards, and like it's glorifying cheating for men, and it's actually worse than I thought. But I don't think this is the right clip. We're gonna finish it anyway.
If she even talks to a dude,
and I understand because this is the problem. I have to qualify every fucking thing I say. People are gonna be like, "Well, Papa Gutti's right." Well, he's not right in any capacity. If you said to me that generally speaking, men and women engage in sex differently, I would agree with you. If you said, and this is what I will say, I think women tend to engage in sex in a more emotional way, and women engage in sex in a more emotional way. I think that generally when a guy cheats, and I think that women can engage in just physical sex, and men can engage in more emotional sex, of course. I do with my wife, obviously. We have like a very emotional, connection. But if you said that generally speaking, I think it's different when a guy will cheat than a girl, because I think that like men tend to be more physical, and it doesn't mean that they don't love their partner. Whereas a woman, it might mean that it's more likely to mean that there's like a more underlying relationship issue. I would agree with that, but it's still really wrong, and you shouldn't be doing it, right? Andrew Tate's not making a nuanced perspective about the different ways that men and women engage with sex and relationships. Right? He's justifying the male perspective and allowing men to cheat. He's prioritizing men over women in this situation. That's why it's sexist. I have to qualify that because I know a lot of you guys are going to take what he's saying and you're going to run with it in a way that isn't, again, critical to what's going on. But that's the difference between expressing a hard truth, which is what I did, versus just being sexist based on a hard truth. Intentionally misrepresenting an aspect of the world to force a narrative. Again, like acknowledging the difference that men and women engage in when it comes to like sex is different from like justifying that difference, which is what Andrew Tate's doing. It's like we both are operating in, like, I would say with a fact, but like what are we doing with that fact? That's more of what I'm talking about here.
Is cheating. Because females are emotionally invested.
Are we now? Tate also has said things that are even worse than that.
Okay.
He has said that rape victims should, quote, bear responsibility for being.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than that. But like, yeah, he did say that there's like a level of responsibility for women who get sexually assaulted, and it wasn't in like this nuanced way. It was like it's like a regressive, ignorant aspect of it.
Right.
I've talked about it multiple
times. And
he's
described in graphic detail how he would attack a girlfriend if she merely accused him of cheating.
That part's not true. That's an inaccurate representation. He was talking about how if she came at him with a fucking machete. That's not even close to what he had said. That's very dishonest from him, but okay.
And then there's Hustlers University.
I guess they're not going to talk
Tate's
about the clip
online
I'm talking
get-rich-quick program with an estimated 127,000 members.
This clip is bullshit. Hopefully, Piers brings up the clip and like specifically because I'm not going to be. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it.
together. They say misogynistic, racist, transphobic. They just put them all together at random. I'm mixed race.
By the way,
I don't know where they get these. They just get these buzzwords and put them in a sentence.
By the way, I completely agree.
It's crazy.
And I've had the same thing done to me.
Okay.
And I'm not calling you anything. I'm asking you what you personally believe you are.
It's not an issue I discuss. What I do discuss is that...
So you support transgender people?
I support individual liberty. I'm a libertarian.
Yeah, so you support transgender people?
Sure.
What do you believe about depression? Do you believe depression is a real thing?
I believe that feeling depressed is real. I don't believe depression as a clinical disease is real, no.
Really?
Correct.
You don't believe people can be clinically depressed?
I think PTSD is very real. Unfortunately, I have some friends who suffer from that. I know that feeling depressed is real. I believe that the number one power you have against these things are trying to take control of your own mind and affecting your own life. I've lived a very difficult life, and I know people who have, that the things that made them feel better is when they woke up and said, you know what, I'm not going to allow this to damage me anymore. I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to get up and I'm going to fight this as hard as I can.
And by the way, on that, I agree.
So we agree.
Yeah, like when it comes to the mental health stuff, like I'm a little bit more like, there are a lot of people in their lives, even with some form of clinical depression, like diagnosed depression, even like a brain chemistry thing, that absolutely would benefit from the mindset of I need to try my best to be happier and trying, but like it could be more productive. Like, there are people who need medication for some stuff, but honestly, it's more about like directing them towards like the correct advice for this stuff, which I don't know that Andrew Tate necessarily does. He's like, yeah, you should have a more positive outlook, which is, it's easy to say, and it's not bad advice, but like doing things like, I understand that it's hard when you're depressed to do things in general, but you kind of have to try to force yourself to do it. So you want to start with small steps. Clean your room. Clean the space that you're in. If that's all you can do for the day, do that. Make steps to just have a better, cleaner atmosphere surrounding you, and you'll be happier. Control your diet. Eating like shit will depress you. It is going to fuck you up. It's going to make you feel like shit. It's going to disrupt, eating like shit is going to disrupt like your life. It's going to make you more depressed. You remember Fat Bastard that's that weird, from Austin Powers? He's like, I eat because I'm unhappy and I'm unhappy because I'm eat. That's the problem. You have a poor relationship with food. Easier said than done. I obviously have a poor relationship with food as well, right? So there are a lot of things that you could do to control it. I think that like TikTok and bad diets are increasing the amount of bad ideologies. We have a very, very aggressive social media presence in general. I think that like it's constantly causing people to forcefully compare themselves to other people on the internet, especially when they're only putting out like the most positive aspects of like their relationships. I think that that's like profoundly negatively impactful, right? People are constantly comparing each other. They're constantly doing things for attention. There's a lot of problems with like mental health that can be very much in control of the individual expressing it. Doesn't mean that all clinical depression is fake though. Like that's the problem. I disagree with Andrew Tate on that, but I don't think that he's being ableist in some capacity. I think that he just doesn't have a super explored perspective on like the more specific aspects of what he's saying.
Favorite speech is the Rocky Balboa one.
Okay, so then we agree.
No,
we did.
Here's where we don't agree.
Piers.
You don't. No, hang on. You got to let me interject when I don't agree with you, right? Where I don't agree with you is that there's no such thing as clinical depression. There absolutely is. Well, it's a proven scientific medical reality. There's a different argument about have we gone a bit too soft, right, in schools and all the rest of it? Absolutely. Do I think some people moan and whine too much about their lot in life? Definitely. Are we a victimhood society? 100%.
Okay.
Is there such a thing as clinical depression? Absolutely. And my argument is that if you actually bracket everybody who's not clinically depressed and doesn't have the genuine medical condition, then actually if millions of people are deemed to have depression, the ones who really need the help don't get it. Well, that's my point.
Well, that I would agree with. You're right.
That's fair. And one of the hardest things about mental health issues is that like there's no objective test for mental health. It's like you talk to somebody and you tell them how you feel. There's not like, I don't know, at least I don't think that there's brain scans to diagnose bipolar even. Though maybe there is. I don't think so though. But I believe they're not used to diagnose bipolar. Okay. So I'm sorry about that. So like that's one of the problems, and it makes it difficult for people to like believe other people. It's like, well, there's no objective proof you have this thing. And then it comes down to like a lack of understanding. Pierce is just trying to make sure that they separate the people with genuinely have bipolar, and the only way you can figure that out. See, this is the biggest problem when it comes to people like basically faking mental illness. There's a lot of people. It's almost like soul and valor. They're like faking it and like taking away from people who actually have some kind of like mental illness that they need help on. And since it's something that like you can't like prove outwardly, you have to kind of take people's words for it in some capacity. And if there's a lot of people lying about it and the only test is like, you know, what you're saying, it makes it difficult to believe some people. And then that outcome of you faking your mental illness, and when some people can tell, it leads to other people that actually have it being devalued in society. That's, I think, what Piers is trying to say, and I respect that. I can understand that. We are getting fucking sloshed right now.
I think it's certainly an overused term.
You don't accept there is such a thing as clinical depression.
No, I don't.
Andrew, you're simply wrong.
You know,
if that's
true.
what you believe, Piers.
That's what I believe.
I don't
no,
believe
he is
taking
wrong.
power away
There
from
is not an eminent doctor in the world
Piers,
that would agree with
Piers,
it. Do you think you know more than doctors?
I can't become clinically depressed.
Why do you know?
Because I don't believe it.
Maybe he can.
I can't be haunted by a ghost if I don't believe in ghosts.
Well, that's like saying I'm never going to die because I don't believe in it. It's ridiculous.
Perhaps, but if it allows me to live a life where I feel happy and
But here's
content
where you,
within myself.
this is that little area where you lose me.
No, I don't lose you.
You are,
because
He does
somebody with
lose a
your
lot of
following
people.
says there's no-
Andrew Tate could be like, listen, I think a lot of it's mentality, but there is clinical depression. That's what the Piers is saying, and I agree with it and I respect it. Andrew's just like, no, these things just don't exist. It's like, bro, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, some of it does exist. It's just gotten a little out of hand. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know what I mean? This is... It's just so funny when he fucking says this shit because he's fucking ballistic.
Thousands of people who have emailed me saying, my doctor told me I was clinically depressed and it's a disease that I have got in my brain and I can't be fixed. And I started listening to you and I realized that that's not the case and I can fix my own life and you're the only person who has ever helped me. Thousands of people.
And I'm sure that's how, I don't know about thousands, but like, let's say that there are plenty of people who reached out to him. Yeah, maybe they were misdiagnosed. Maybe the doctor was overprescribing that. Maybe we have an infrastructure that prioritizes mental health diagnoses for money for some doctors, especially in like, which is probably more American people considering there's like a fucking financial incentive. That might exist, but understand that, of course, the people whose message, the people who your message resonates with, of course, they're going to reach out to you and say, hey, you really helped me. But that doesn't mean that even close to 1% of people with like a mental health diagnoses are like, yeah, this is all it took. Oh, thanks. Like just being like, hey, don't worry about it. That cured me. And that's the problem, is that Andrew Tate is too anecdotal in his discovery and whatnot, or his interpretation of life.
Email me that exact email.
If you think you are single-handedly curing people of clinical depression, you are living in cloud cuckoo land.
I am reading the emails of people who I have cured of clinical depression.
You're reading emails from people who have believed you when you say there isn't such a thing, and they've probably never been diagnosed clinically depressed. They just want to go along with what Andrew Tate says.
That part also could be true. It could be people just lying to Andrew Tate. But even if they aren't, like, you know, they don't have to all be lying to Andrew Tate. What the hell? Did I take the wrong? Oh, I took the wrong dragon.
I don't think so.
I think your view of that is dangerous.
I respect that you think my view is dangerous, and I respect you have the right to view that, to think that. I think that clinical depression, I actually agree with you, is massively overdiagnosed. I've already said that PTSD is a very real thing. I've already said...
hang on.
Okay.
Again, you're misquoting me. I did not say clinical depression is massively overdiagnosed. I said that people who claim to be depressed but don't have clinical depression, I think that is massively overblown, right? In other words, there are a lot of people who just have a bad day and declare, I've got depression. And I say, well, have you been to a doctor? Have you been clinically diagnosed? If you have, and you have clinical depression, that's one thing. But if you haven't, we could probably work on some mental strength and resilience skills with you. But a clinically depressed person has an absolutely proven medical condition that is beyond their control.
Not according to me and many others, my friend.
Well, look, what do you know about it, honestly?
Sure.
You're a guy on the make. He's done very well for himself, spouting stuff off, much of which I agree with, as you've seen in the interview, but some of which is ludicrous, and that's one of them.
It's not ludicrous.
It is.
It's not.
If you said to me, we're in a victim whose society has got to stop, I'm with you.
Okay.
But the moment you try and deny clinical depression...
I believe feeling depressed is real. I do not believe it's a disease that you catch from the sky and you cannot affect. I believe that no matter what happens, I believe you have control of your own mind and you can fight against it.
Fine.
Good. So we agree.
No, we don't.
Yes, we do.
No, we don't.
Piers, you're on my side, afraid of being cancelled along with me.
As I said to you from the start,
that's all
I agree with a lot of what you say.
Completely. So
but I'm taking you to task over the stuff I don't agree with.
Sure.
And I'm just not sure you understand why it's wrong, which is in itself quite revealing. Let me talk to you about Alex. Let me talk to you about Alex Jones, right? Who I have a bit of history with. He tried to get me deported from the United States.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. What is your view of Alex Jones?
I think
Did he?
that
He's fucking
Alex
crazy.
Jones...
Alex Jones is fucking crazy, and he did a really bad thing. And he hurt a lot of people. I'm just going to be real with you. When it came to Sandy Hook, it's a real scummy fucking thing. The most charitable perspective you can have is that he was like deluded by a conspiracy theory and he went too far, but he got the families of people whose children were murdered at Sandy Hook to be harassed. It's a horrible thing. He's a piece of shit. I'm not going to have the most positive interpretation. I think that he genuinely hurt those people, and I don't really care that. I'm okay with him being deplatformed. I'm not going to be charitable, but that is your charitable, would be your charitable interpretation.
A sovereign individual who, very much like the rabid left, deserves a chance to speak on his points of view. I think that the truth on issues is usually somewhere in the middle between two extremes. And
So you think Sandy Hook was staged?
I don't know anything about Sandy Hook.
Really? You know he's just been sued by the families for millions and millions.
I have no idea.
You don't know anything about it?
No.
So why would you support someone in public when you know nothing about the most infamous
When
thing
have I supported him in public?
You have supported him in public.
Harvard individual who, very much like the rabid left, deserves a chance to speak on his points of view. I think that the truth on issues is usually somewhere in the middle between two extremes. And
you think Sandy Hook was
the most popular thing that he's ever said was something that was about Sandy Hook. There's no way you can know Alex Jones without knowing that. So I'm confused how he doesn't understand that.
Was staged?
I don't know anything about Sandy Hook.
Really? You know he's just been sued by the families for millions and millions.
I have no idea.
You don't know anything about it?
No.
So why would you support someone in public when you know nothing about the most infamous
When
thing?
have I supported him in public?
You have supported him in public.
Just didn't
I don't know Sandy Hook. I don't know. And
you know what it was?
It was a mass shooting.
Of school children.
Yeah.
Okay. But to sit and
he
he's actually, no, let's stop for a second. Please
Well,
don't
hold
interrupt.
on a second.
Here's why I know why you're good at your job. First, you interrupt.
Hold on. First of all, he's not really interrupting you that much. He's pushing you on things. You're saying he's interrupting you because you're frustrated that he's holding you to a point. That being said, you know that Sandy Hook was a mass shooting, right? He does know that. He just said that. And yet you're saying you don't know about Sandy Hook. It sounds like you just don't want to give your opinion, but you think that it could have been a conspiracy. So it sounds like you might be upholding it. I don't know if he'll explicitly say that, but then he should have been like, yeah, I disagree with that. But you know Sandy Hook. You're saying you don't, but you explicitly know Sandy Hook. And you're just like, yeah, I don't know that. What do you mean? Own it. What are you talking about?
People a lot, which is good. It's a good skill.
Actually,
and then there you go, prove me right.
But here's
and
exactly
the timing's good.
Here's exactly what I do. I only interrupt people like you when you either refuse to answer the question or answer a completely different one.
Sure.
And I want to remind you of what the question was.
Fair,
or when you misquote me back, which you've done repeatedly through the interview, where you say, you see, Piers, you agree with me. And the viewer who's been watching will go, no, he didn't.
Cool, no problem. The other thing you do is you try and set these traps like now. So you're saying
what's the trap you think I'm setting?
You're saying that I agree with every single point of view a man has.
I literally didn't say that.
No, he didn't. He didn't say that. But you have to hold more firm to this shit. Like you're playing a very kind of a scummy game where you're being very indirect about everything that you're saying, and you won't put down a firm stance on a particular on a thing. You just said you don't know Sandy Hook, even though you know exactly what Sandy Hook was, and you're trying to avoid that point and not offer a reasonable criticism onto Alex Jones. You should be mortified by that, but it sounds like he might believe the conspiracy, which is why he's not being explicit against the conspiracy.
Saying, well, you support Alex Jones.
Why would you misquote me?
Because you're saying you support Alex Jones, and you said you've been on his podcast, and he said this. I don't know.
What do you think of Alex Jones?
I don't know everything he said.
What do you think of him?
I think on his podcast he was cordial. I think he was professional on his podcast. I've also done podcasts with rabid leftists and people who openly hate me.
Alex Jones said that Sandy Hook didn't happen. It was staged by actors.
Okay.
This compounded the appalling grief of the families of those poor 20 children
okay.
who were gunned to pieces by a lunatic with an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle. They were already grief-stricken beyond belief.
Absolutely.
And this guy poured petrol onto that grief quite deliberately to make a huge amount of money from his InfoWars fake news bullshit. And as a result, a lot of the families have now sued him, and they've won. And he's going to have to pay back tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in damages to these families. And quite right, it won't do anything about the pain he caused them. Some of them actually had people turn up outside their houses with guns because Alex Jones had told them that these parents were making it all up. They were all staged actors. It was all run by the government. So I simply say to you, now I've told you that, what is your view of Alex Jones?
I don't see why any of that has to do with me. It's
what? Dude, you're giving a ringing endorsement to Alex Jones, and then when someone's like, yeah, he's done really bad things, you're just like, well, that has nothing to do with me. Why is it that he doesn't have an opinion on a really objectively bad thing that somebody's had done? Why can't you say, you could come up with a charitable interpretation of that if you'd like, if you be my guest. But what the fuck is this? This is he's just refusing to give his perspective on this. He's given a ringing endorsement, even in this conversation. He's like, Alex Jones has been very polite, cordial to me, et cetera, et cetera. And then when Piers is like, yeah, this really horrific thing that he did to people who lost their children. Well, what does that have to do with me? Why don't you just say that you think that it's shit? Because if I was going to be bad faith here, if I would be like, well, it sounds like it sounds like potentially, and part of me believes this, but I'm not going to say if it's 100% true. Part of me feels like the reason he's not asserting aggressively against this is because he thinks that maybe it would he wants to maintain his audience, and some of them he has audience crossover with Alex Jones, which is possibly true, considering. So what the fuck?
It's very interesting. I've done the guy's podcast. I know him well. He was professional and courteous to me. When I meet somebody and they show me respect, I show them back respect. That's what I do, as I did with you.
You respect him?
If somebody shows me respect and is courteous to me, I'm courteous back.
If Vladimir Putin had a podcast, would you go on it?
Sure.
So being like, yeah, I respect, or if he showed me respect, so I'm not gonna like shit on him. That's fine. You can have that perspective, but like again, he's presenting you this really bad thing that's being done. So why aren't you saying like, yeah, I think that was like real shit of him. Like, why can't you just put your foot down and be like a man and be against that thing? That's like the bigger issue here, is that you're refusing to do that.
You would, great.
I've done a bunch of podcasts with people who are advocating for things that I do not agree with on every single level. In fact, most of my podcasts are me disagreeing with people. So it's completely crazy that you're trying to lump me in with that.
So why don't you just explain what you disagree with here? Just do that. Like, yeah, you know what? I disagree with this from Tate. Okay. Why not just do that right now? Because you're saying that like I'm a reasonable guy that disagrees when there's something wrong that's happening. Okay. So just why can't you then why is your defense it has nothing to do with me instead of giving your opinion on something? It sounds like you're afraid to disagree. Like, if you're so expressive about how easy it is for you to disagree with people, about how you're so level-headed, et cetera, then show it now, right here. Why aren't you just put your money where your mouth is? What the fuck?
That's cheap.
I think you are completely misconstruing the point of what I'm saying. I think deliberately.
No,
Yeah,
what you're
I
trying
agree
is a
with
cheap
that.
trick. And
Not
I'm just
really.
making it clear to the audience.
He's just asking you if you think that somebody who upheld a fucking conspiracy that got people harassed did a bad thing, and you're refusing to answer it, and you're trying to play the victim card. You're being a victim right now.
I'm just curious where your moral line is.
It's a cheap trick.
Where's your moral line?
I disagree with the points of view with the majority of the people I do podcasts with. So it's a very cheap trick you're trying here.
So then just say that. This is the problem, because this conversation doesn't need to be had. And a lot of people, some people in my chat, and I understand you like Andrew Tate, are desperate to defend Andrew Tate. He was asked a question. This is the perspective from Piers Morgan. I'll be like very assertive about it. It's like, hey, I've seen you in the past have a ringing endorsement of Alex Jones. Okay, that's the first line that he makes, right? The response from Andrew Tate can be like, well, that's not true. Then Piers goes, okay, well, do you know about Sandy Hook? And he's like, well, I don't really know anything about that. Okay. Then Piers goes into the specifics about how Alex Jones upheld a conspiracy theory for money, in his opinion. I don't know if it was for money or not, but upheld a conspiracy theory that got the parents of children who were murdered by a gunman to be so harassed that he lost a lawsuit over it. And then all of a sudden, Andrew's like, well, I know what Sandy Hook is. And it's like, okay. So then what's your perspective on Alex Jones doing that? Well, it has nothing to do with me. He's afraid. He's afraid to give his honest perspective. I need you to understand. You can like Andrew Tate, but when you justify the bad behavior of people you like, you're not making them better creators, I'll tell you that. This is a coward move. You can say, hey, listen, personally, I disagree with what he did. I think that he justifiably lost the lawsuit. And I hope that brings some kind of peace and justice to the families. However, when I talked to him, he was respectful to me. And I think that we live in a system where people do bad things and then they get punished. He did a bad thing and he got punished. And he was respectful to me in a one-on-one. And I don't believe in engaging with him in a shouting contest just because he did a bad thing. All of a sudden, people go, okay, now people might still disagree with you, but that's giving your honest perspective. Or you can say, well, maybe it was a conspiracy theory. I'm obviously going to disagree with you, but there's a fear from Andrew Tate of answering the question. He's being a coward about answering the question. And you have to understand that. And when you guys keep saying, well, how is this relevant to him? He's asking him a question. Why is it so hard for him to answer this question? It should be a very easy question to answer. Why should he say that? So what do you think he should say? That's the thing. The problem is a lot of you guys are just running a lot of defense for Andrew Tate. And as you get older, you'll understand the ways that you're wrong.
When people invent vile things to make themselves rich off the back of families of little kids who've been blown to pieces with a machine gun or a semi-automatic version of a machine gun, I think that is actually a line I wouldn't cross. I wouldn't be happy.
And again, the reason he brings up Alex Jones is because Piers said from the start, you guys have to engage critically unless you're coming in late. I'm going to have to stop responding to the questions. Piers said, you've had a ringing endorsement for Alex Jones. That's why he brought it up. It's because he made a public statement about it. Apparently, I haven't seen the public statement. That's the claim. That's why he brought it up. So, you know,
to go on someone's podcast when they've been responsible for doing that. It's not about political views or differences of opinion over facts. It's about somebody deliberately inventing a pack of lies to compound the grief of families.
And you could even say, like, I don't think that's what he was doing. I think he genuinely believed the conspiracy theory. That's Andrew Tate can say that. I think it's unfortunate what happened to the families, but I don't think he intentionally did it. You can have that perspective, because I don't know if Alex Jones actually had a financial incentive to do that. Maybe he did. Maybe he concocted the whole thing for that, or maybe he's a fucking crazy conspiracy theorist that actually believed that there's, you know, we're making the frogs gay. You know what I mean? You can have a nuanced answer, but
I'm curious. You don't think you have any need to go down any kind of moral quandary about people like that before you continue to allow them to use you for their own promotion?
He didn't use me. He didn't use me.
Why is he having you on the podcast?
Because we disagreed and discussed points like we're doing with you right now.
Did you call him out on that?
Are you using me? We didn't discuss that.
I'm not using you. I'm giving you a platform most people aren't giving you right now to show the world who you really are.
Fantastic. So neither of us are using each other. I'm here on your show. I'm providing you with content. You're giving me a platform, and nobody's using each other. It's mutual. We don't agree on a whole bunch of issues.
That's fine.
And here we are.
Is
a robust exchange?
Is this one of the issues you don't agree with?
Do you identify as a feminist?
I think that women and men are fantastic. Both of us are fantastic. I think women reproduce. I think women need to be respected, protected, provided for. I think that modern feminism is kind of hard for me to even truly understand.
What do you think it means? What is feminism?
I'm going to be very clear. The fact that he was being such like a dishonest like weasel about that question makes me lose. I mean, I didn't have a particularly high amount of respect for Andrew Tate in the first place, but it makes me lose respect for him because he's being a coward and won't answer the question. I think that that's pathetic. He shouldn't have a problem answering that question. I think that he probably thinks that it was a conspiracy and he knows that's probably social suicide, or he disagrees with Alex Jones, but he feels like he has fan crossover with him, so he refuses to give his honest perspective on it. It's one of those two things, honestly. I think that that's pathetic.
That the idea of feminism is that men and women are equal under the law.
And do you believe that?
Completely.
We should be treated completely equal.
Yeah, but we are equal under the law. Wouldn't you agree?
Not really. I think there are still some issues in the world where, I mean, certainly in workplace, the gender pay gap remains. They're not treated equally in most cases, women.
Well, so first of all, let's be objectively clear. Let me just go back a little bit because I'm going to have to disagree with Piers on some of this.
What is feminism?
I think that fantastic. Both of us are fantastic. I think women reproduce. I think women need to be respected, protected, provided for. I think that modern feminism is kind of hard for me to even truly understand.
What do you think it means? What is feminism?
I think that the idea of feminism is that men and women are equal under the law.
And do you believe that?
Completely.
We are in Western countries, by the way. Now, first of all, I want to be explicitly clear. In Western countries, men and women are objectively equal under law. If anything, you could argue that under law, there are areas where men are actually at a loss. Like, I think legally in America, correct me if I'm wrong, men have to sign up for the draft and women don't, right? So you could push that inequality. Either way, they don't enforce that anyway. I know a lot of men who haven't signed up for the draft anyway. But under the law, absolutely. It's the conversation about, like, has society from a social perspective caught up? That's really where the conversation lies in.
Completely equal.
Yeah, but we are equal under the law. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah,
not
for
really.
sure.
I think there are still some issues in the world where, I mean, certainly in workplace, the gender pay gap remains. They're not treated equally in most cases, women.
Well, that can be discussed, the gender pay gap. I think that's already been discussed at length. I think
so. Here's the thing with the gender pay gap. I don't know Piers. He seems like actually an intelligent guy. I'm watching. This is like the first bit of media I've watched with Piers. So I don't know the nuances of his understanding of the gender pay gap. However, a lot of people are going, this is why this is something that you should qualify, because like it's a problem when you have these conversations is like a lot of people are single issue supporters or voters. So if you're watching Piers Morgan and you agree with everything up until now, you're like, oh, well, the gender pay gap doesn't exist, which you're wrong about, by the way. However, it's more nuanced than that, because when I say gender pay gap, what do you think? Oh, well, the statistic says it's 80%, but they're not factoring for multiple factors like hours worked, jobs performed, experience, vacation taken, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when you actually normalize for those factors, the pay gap shrinks massively from 80% to 98%. But it's still 98%. And then that's the conversation about like, well, what does the 98% manifest as? And I would say it's a mixture of different things. One of those things is going to be some men, probably older men, who don't respect women in high positions of power, holding back women. That's something that's simply just they're going to have to die off, right? And we're going to have conversations about workplace culture changing, you know, because a lot of workplaces do need to have their culture change. Another part of it is that women, in my experience, don't advocate for themselves in the same way that men do. right? Now, maybe that's biological. However, I know from a social perspective, anytime a woman advocates for herself, she's a bitch, right? But when a man advocates for himself, he's a strong man. And so we have different social standards or different social interpretations for different behaviors based on men and women. Right? So that's probably part of it too. So we need to teach women to be stronger. And we need to teach men to respect women. And I think that we're doing a pretty good job of that. Right? And that's just something that you would do over a period of time. So
that there's
actually, you think women
should
should go to work?
I think women should work completely. I do believe that in my personal view, the most important and respectful thing a woman can do is become a mother. I think that having children is a beautiful thing.
Should young men, though, all aspire to be like you?
Should young men aspire to work very hard, have no criminal record, become multimillionaires, protect and provide for the women close to them, be sovereign so they can stand up and have their own points of view in face of cancellation, be able to not be mentally intimidated when they go on national TV and there's traps set up for them? Yeah, I believe that.
He's such a victim in his own mind. It's kind of sad. It's kind of sad because he loses a lot of his strength when he victimizes himself like this.
Confident, strong men who stand up.
There are qualities that Andrew Tate has that are positive, but again, there's also a lot of negative ones that we've gone through this entire time. People aren't just extrapolating that out of there, extrapolating the positives out of Andrew Tate. A lot of people are taking the negatives, like the sexist stuff too, and that's the problem. And that's why we're here. You know,
protect and provide for women are a good thing for the world and a good force for the world. And I don't think that I put a magic spell on anybody. I think there's a whole bunch of men in the world who understands my value, and I'm certainly not the worst influence out here, Piers. You have Little Nas twerking on the devil on music videos, which our children are digesting. You have drill artists singing about stabbing people to death in the middle of a knife crime.
Okay. I didn't know that I was going to hear the most boomer fucking take from Andrew Tate. I'm going to explain to you how it's actually a hypocritical take. Let me just re-listen to that fucking banger that he just said.
Which our children are. You have Little Nas twerking on the devil on music videos, which our children are digesting.
Okay. So let's say that Andrew Tate is making a firm stance against over-sexualization in media. You run a webcam porn business. Now, you don't sell to children, but you've said that you think porn is bad for people because it ruins the mentality of men while intentionally engaging in the selling of pornography. So you don't really get to virtue signal, because you are virtue signaling here, because you don't actually care about this sexualization problem considering you're contributing to it. He's just deflecting. Now, the other problem with that is that he brings up the devil. You're twerking on the devil. While you talk about how you want to uphold religious values in different capacities, constantly referencing traditional religious values, but then advocating for men to be able to cheat on women. You're not a religious man, and you're not a man who actually believes that we should reduce sexualization in society very clearly based on the way that you live your own life. And so it is a forced pretend outrage to sit here and criticize Lil Nas X for this thing. Just letting you know, he doesn't. Oh God, I can't. So somebody who's been critical in the chat mentioned that he doesn't run the webcam business, and that's a lie. I think that this is the perfect example. This is why I'm actually, because I'm doing better at like not engaging with people that have like dumb criticisms, but I'm good. This is a good one. So Andrew Tate started. He's on record. He started the webcam business to sell porn to men. He talked about how he got some of his girlfriends together to start it, how he even on his website, he made this point about how he was really good at making women fall in love with him and then getting them to do webcam business for him. And your point of defense is, well, technically, he passed it off to his brother to run. Understand that that is the pinnacle. And you think that's a reasonable argument. Understand that that's the pinnacle of unintelligence in this engagement, in this conversation. Okay, like that's such a dumb, bad point. That's such a dumb, bad point, bro. I mean, come on. He's like, well, technically his brother runs it. He started the company and then passed it off to his brother. It's a valid criticism. The fact that he doesn't run it exclusively anymore is not a good criticism, brother. It's embarrassing for you. You should feel embarrassed by that take. He still supports the business. He still owns the business, I believe. His brother just runs it. He didn't give it away. He still collects revenue from it. That's very unintelligent of you. Jesus Christ.
You have drill artists singing about stabbing people to death in the middle of a knife crime epidemic. You have rabid psychopaths on whether the right or the left announcing violence on the other side.
I think
Yeah, like Alex Jones, building this conspiracy theory.
if you're honest with yourself, that you can see why people found a lot of the stuff you've said problematic and misogynist. And I think you recognized you wouldn't express yourself in that way again because you've understood that it's caused a lot of harm. And that's really what I wanted to get to today, was an acknowledgement by you.
I think it's a very charitable interpretation of this conversation, Piers.
Said in the wrong way, created the wrong impression if you didn't mean them the way you intended them, and can therefore have a malevolent influence when you have a huge following.
Yeah, when you have a huge following, you certainly have to be a lot more careful about how you get certain points across. That's absolutely a fact.
True. I can personally attest to the mistake of, because do I know he collects revenue? Yes, he's explicitly said this before. This is the problem when like Andrew Tate dick writers love Andrew Tate but never watch his content, and it's kind of funny that you dick writers never actually listen to what he's saying. You just run defense for him. Where I've watched probably like 40 hours of this motherfucker's content. Anyway, I've been in the same situation with TikTok. It's funny because I've always had the similar positions on like my more progressive values from the start, but I've expressed them differently. And people used to think I was like a much more conservative leaning person when I was on TikTok because I was making more edgy jokes and doing like a lot of other stuff. And so, I totally understand what it's like to be rushed, especially with a wave of like attention. And for some of the stuff you say to get taken out of context, because part of that is true with some of the stuff Andrew Tate says, not all of it, but part of it. Like from where I'm from, I live in a very blunt area. I live in a very blunt place where like people can say things without like a little bit of sugar on it and we won't take it the wrong way. That's where I live. That's not everybody on the internet. So I would express myself in that way. And people on the internet, some people are more sensitive, and there's nothing wrong with being more sensitive. And there's such thing as being too sensitive, but there's also such thing as being too blunt. Anyway, and I understand that like when you're on the internet, you're not just communicating with people in like your local sphere. You're communicating with people that are in like different spheres. And like that's an adjustment on the internet that takes a long time to make. When you blow up really quickly, it's hard to make that adjustment.
You're coming all the way from Romania.
Thank you.
It's been an interesting conversation, and I thank you for having it.
Okay.
Well, that's it from me. Whatever you're up to, keep it uncensored. Good night.
Okay. Well, that was an interesting conversation. Let's hope it doesn't get DMCA'd. Yeah, some of these Andrew Tate stands are wild. Some of these Andrew Tate stands are fucking bonkers. They're fucking crazy. You guys are fucking insane. No, but you guys are fun, I'll tell you that. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching, and a special shout out to all my Patreon patrons, my YouTube members, and my Twitch subs. If you'd like to learn how you can contribute even more than you already are by simply watching the video, you can check the links down below, which will unlock a special feature depending on the platform that you subscribe to, such as Patreon here that will get your name right here on this wall. Thank you so much, guys, again for watching, and have a good one.